Good evening, everybody. If you hold on one second, the clerk is going to begin the recording. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm John Igliozzi, City Councilman, Chair of Finance of the City of Providence Council. We're going to begin this Committee on Finance this evening. It's Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Chairman Igliozzi.
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Ryan.
Present.
Councilwoman Castillo. Councilwoman Castillo is absent. Councilwoman Anthony.
Present.
Councilman Taylor.
Here.
We have 4 present and 1 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Let the record reflect that Councilman Correa is present. Kenny Cheverini, City Solicitor, is present. And Gina Costa, the Internal Auditor, is present. City Treasurer Jimmy Lombardi, Councilwoman LaFortune is present. Councilwoman Miller is present. Council President Matos is present. I think that's what we have at this time. I think I have all the council members. And I see Councilwoman Castillo. She's trying to get in, so I'm sure she'll get it squared away. All right. So it's, we're going to jump around the agenda real quick. So take an item. You take an item out of order. Item number 10.
So moved.
Second.
Item number 10 out of order. By Vice Chair, second by Councilman Taylor. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. We've been informed that Jordan Seabury is not able to make it this evening. So what I'd ask the committee to do is that we need to deny it without prejudice, because then we run out of time. And this way the administration will just resubmit, and then we can have the person come back and get properly vetted. So
Motion to deny number 10 without prejudice.
Second.
Second by Councilman Taylor, Councilman Castillo. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Next, let's take another item out of order. I'd like to take item number 12.
So moved.
Second.
By Vice Second by Taylor, Councilman Castillo. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Madam Clerk, do we have item number 12, please?
Communication from His Honor the Mayor, dated March 8, 2021, informing the honorable members of the City Council that pursuant to Sections 302B and 1103 of the Providence Planning Charter of 1980, as amended in Public Law, Chapter 45-50, Sections 1 through 31, passed in 1987, here's this day appointing Elder Gonzalez Trejo of 244 Rankin Avenue, Providence, Rhode Island, 02908, as a member of the Human Relations Commission for a term to expire on January 31st, 2024, and respectfully submit the same for your approval.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is Mr. Trejo present?
He is, Mr. Chair.
If so, please make him a panelist, right?
He is a panelist, yes.
Right. Why don't you swear the individual in, and we can begin the process.
Mr. Trejo, can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Elder Gonzalez Trejo, 244 Rankin Avenue, Providence, Rhode Island.
Welcome, Mr. Trejo. Thank you. It looks like the mayor would like to appoint you to the Human Relations Commission. Could you just give us a quick little statement about your background and why you would like to become a member of that commission, and maybe some of the things you'd like to try to achieve? You have the mic, sir.
Absolutely, thank you. So I grew up here in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm from a Guatemalan immigrant family. I grew up in the Onlyville neighborhood, later attended classical high school, and then the University of Rhode Island. So a lot of my life has been built here in Rhode Island. After that, I pursued a career opportunity as a wildlife biologist in the Bay Area. And I was there 4 years where I explored a lot of my passion for social justice. I was later granted an opportunity to come work for the Woonasquatucket River Watershed Council as a community programs director. And so a part of what I aim to do is combine both my passions for environmental conservation and social justice, but also address some of the issues that a lot of the immigrant community, the Black, Indigenous communities are facing here in Rhode Island itself. I think that the pandemic has affected the businesses of these communities heavily, and I would like to kind of aid in any way that I can in helping these businesses kind of generate wealth, but also how to have these communities engage with each other, so that we can have these businesses thrive once again.
Thank you. Any comments or questions by committee members?
No, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Anybody else? Or with that, do we have entertain a motion to recommend approval?
Motion to recommend approval of item 12.
Second.
Motion and second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Be well and be safe, and you move on to the full council. And thank you for willing to serve. Great. Next item, let's out of order. Madam Clerk, let's take item item number 4 out of order.
So moved.
Motion to that. Vice Chair,
Second.
second, Mike. Taylor and Castillo, discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Clerk, item number 4, please.
An ordinance of the City of Providence approving improvements to Providence Water Supply Board's distribution system and appurtenances thereto, including but not limited to the cleaning, relining, repair, and replacement of water mains, transmission lines, service lines, and valves, and attendant expenses, and approving the financing thereof by the issuance of water revenue bonds and notes therefore in the amount not to exceed $21 million.
Great. Who's on this item, Madam Clerk?
I'm promoting Nancy Perillo, Greg Jason, Peter is an attendee.
Yes, Nancy Perillo will be answering. Nancy, are you there?
I am. Is there anyone else that needs to be promoted?
Just myself, Nancy, and Greg for our items.
Okay, so noted.
Okay.
Nancy, go ahead.
So I see,
This,
why don't you, who are the folks going to speak this evening? I'm sorry.
Nancy Perillo, Greg Jason, and Peter Pelosi.
Okay. Good. Ms. Perillo, you taking the lead on this matter?
yes, I am.
All right. So just please state your name for the record and what your position you hold, and et cetera, and then we can move from there.
My name is Nancy Perillo. I am the Senior Manager for Finance at Providence Water Supply Board.
Okay. So can you tell us what item number 4 is about and
I
give
can.
some detail? Great.
The this item is for permission to borrow $20 million from the Rhode Island Infrastructure Bank. The $21 million will get us the necessary funds to continue on the water main rehabilitation project that has been ongoing for the last several years. This is a project that's been required under a consent agreement with the Department of Health, where we've been ordered to do about $19.1 million a year in construction for this project. The $21 million includes the $19.1 million necessary for construction, as well as the debt service reserve fund and any cost of issuance associated with doing this borrowing. We anticipate that this borrowing will be a subsidized interest rate of 25% of the market value for loans issued at our current credit rating, which is a AA minus. Based on information from our financial advisor, we're looking at a market rate of about 3.5%. When we look at the discounts and how it gets applied, we're looking at about we're estimating about a 2.1% interest rate over the 20-year life of this loan.
Okay. Mr., who else is on? Mr. Jason, who else is it? Who else
Mr.
is?
Pelosi.
All right, so, do you folks want to just introduce yourselves, just state your name, record, or your position, and then what do you want to say on this behalf on these two items, on this item? Or do you have anything at all?
This is
Go ahead,
Peter
Pete.
Pelosi, Deputy General Manager, Providence Water. I totally agree with Nancy's explanation of the 21 million. Again, it's money that we are under agreement to spend 19.1 per year, and we will continue to do so.
Perfect. All right, any comments or questions by committee members?
No, Mr. Chair.
Do you have a question?
I do.
All right, Mr. Treasurer?
Could you just go over the fees involved in this?
The fees, we have not actually nailed them down together all at this point because we have been still putting this together. As soon as I have an idea of what they're going to be, we do know that there's a 1% origination fee. They're looking at a debt service reserve fund of about 1.3 to 1.4 million. And the rest of cost to issuance, we're looking at about $35,000 for legal fees, about $14,000 for our financial advisor, and then trustee fees and accounting fees come to about $6,000 all in total. But those are all estimates. I haven't talked to anybody in terms of this particular deal until I knew it was going forward.
So, you don't think this is a little early to be asking council approval without having the backup on what it's gonna cost? Don't we always get that first?
Not necessarily. I can't move forward with it till I know that I have approval to even move forward. So, as soon as I have the rest of them, fees, I will forward them to you, Mr. Treasurer.
Mr. Treasurer, this is Peter Pelosi. Mr. Treasurer, Chairman, this is the same protocol that we've used every time we needed to borrow money for our lead service program. We go to council first, go to finance, get it approved, then Nancy does her due diligence once we have the final okay.
Yeah, but you did mention that you've hired a financial advisor.
What's
You don't
that?
have a price? Didn't you mention that you have a financial advisor?
We will have a new financial advisor.
You don't have one now?
I have not spoken to either Hilltop Securities or to PFM about doing this deal yet.
Okay, I thought you said that the fiscal advisor stated something earlier, but if I'm wrong, that's fine. Does the treasurer sign off on this?
I spoke to Hilltop Securities to give us, if they could give us the best estimate on what the interest rates are doing in the market at this rate. The Hilltop Securities is one of the financial advisors for the city for borrowing. So I just asked them a question. They gave me interest rates. I have not talked to them about specifically doing this deal.
Thank you. Does the treasurer sign off on this bond? You know?
What's that?
Does the treasurer sign off on this bond?
Which treasurer?
Me.
Not yet. That's why we're here. I thought.
No, the process, Nancy, does he eventually sign off on it?
Yes,
Okay, so I'll get those numbers at some point.
yes. Yep,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions? Entertain a motion, recommend?
Motion to recommend approval.
Vice Chair, second by Council Castillo. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next items out of order. Let's take items I think these are all water, 6 through 9 are water supply board, is that right, Madam Clerk?
That is correct.
Right. So
So
why don't we
moved.
just take, I take items 6 through 9 out of order by Vice Chair, second by Council Castillo. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Madam Clerk, item number 6, please.
Resolution authorizing approval of the following contract award by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with section 21-26A of the Code of Ordinances, Tucson Incorporated, for $1,262,690.
Okay. And why don't you take all them all up at the same time, and then we can just go one after another, how's that, okay?
Okay, item 7.
My committee's okay with that. Good, Madam Clerk?
Item 7, resolution authorizing approval of the following contract award by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with section 21-26A of the Code of Ordinances. Cathedral Corporation, $2,100,000. Number 8, resolution authorizing approval of the following contract award by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with section 21-26A of the Code of Ordinances. W. Walsh Company Incorporated, $2,500,000. Number 9, resolution authorizing approval of the following contract award by the Board of Contract and Supply in accordance with section 21-26A of the Code of Ordinances. Neptune Technology Group Incorporated. Total amount not to exceed $1,950,000.
Thank you. So let's take item, who's gonna speak on this item? Item number 6 we'll take up first?
Yeah, I'm Greg Jason, Providence Water, Deputy General Manager.
Sure.
This is part of our ongoing, as Nancy said, it's what we'll be using the bond money for. It's part of our ongoing water main rehabilitation program. This particular contract is for work in the Plain Street area of Providence, right around Rhode Island Hospital. So it's just our typical cleaning and lining, replacing hydrants, valves, services. It's our typical main rehabilitation work.
So if I'm looking at, it looks like, is it 6, 7, and 8 all related? No, right?
6 and
7 is not.
6 and 8 are related. They're both main replacement work, or main rehabilitation work, sorry.
6 and 8 are, right? Okay.
Correct.
And it looks like you use the same, do you guys use the same, okay. All right, you put it out to bid separately, okay.
Yeah, they're
All right,
both, they're
thanks.
two separate contracts. They're publicly bid.
But 2 separate RFPs and everything, I see.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
I see. And it just so happens that, so that you had a competitive bid process. Okay, that's great.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions or comments by committee members?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right, anybody else? All right, then, how about for number 8? Can you tell us about number 8?
Yeah.
Actually, tell us about number 8, and then we can move on with those two, because they're similar, right? You
So
said?
number 8 is similar. It's a publicly bid main rehabilitation program. It's that is in the Auburn area of Cranston. Again, cleaning and lining, replacement of services, hydrants, valves, just repair to our existing infrastructure.
Great. Any comments or questions on item number 8?
No, Mr. Chair.
Let's go to item number 7, sir.
This is Peter Pelosi,
Yeah.
Deputy General Manager, Providence Water. This item is for the printing and mailing of our water bills. Providence Water has approximately 75,000 customers that we bill on a quarterly basis. So that's approximately 900,000 bills a year. Cathedral Corporation was the low bidder for 1,000. So their contract is going to be approximately $350,000 a year. But we also, because of our permit with the United States Post Office, they have to put the money into our permit. So we also give them approximately $340,000, which is just basically a pass-through. So their contract per year is approximately $700,000 a year. So for the 3 years, it's $2.1 million. And again, half of that approximately is just postage.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions on that item?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you. Just a question, Greg, what efforts have been made, if any, regarding trying to get electronic bills versus mailing, or do we have a requirement for a paper mailed invoice?
I'll have Peter answer that question.
Thank you.
This is Peter. We do have online. We've had it for probably 4 years now. We have online payments, electronic payments, where customers can sign up through our website, which would bring them to an invoice cloud portal where they can put in how they prefer to pay. They can have it come directly out of their credit card or their checking account with a 40-cent ACH fee, or they can have it directly come out of credit cards or however they prefer. There's 3 different options for them to choose. They do still, even though they pay electronically, they still have an option to either get an email with just a PDF, which is a display of their bill, or they can get the paper copy as well.
Is there a requirement? Is there a requirement, any requirement that we have to provide a paper bill?
No, there's not a requirement.
Okay. I just think that's a lot of money. And I'd like to see an initiative or an effort directed toward trying to get as many people as possible on electronic payment.
Right, we totally agree, Chairwoman. We've been trying to do that. We've been working with Invoice Cloud. The reason why we made it an option right now, because when Invoice Cloud came on board, we asked them their opinion, and they said that they saw where not getting a paper copy, fewer customers were signing up for that electronic service. We currently have, I believe the last count that I had was about a 70% solely electronic billing, meaning they do not get the paper bill. So we're at least on the right side of that tilt in sending out fewer bills. We probably, out of our 75,000, right now have approximately, I'd say 12 to 15,000 customers that pay electronically monthly. And also keep in mind, due to COVID, since June-ish of 2020, where customers were paying for that service to pay us electronically via credit card, via ACH, the Public Utilities Commission forced all utilities to absorb those fees. So Providence Water is absorbing all electronic payment fees, and we have been since June at a tune of about $30,000 a month. And we're forced to do that, as well as National Grid, until the PUC changes that docket 5022 ruling.
So we're paying for paper notices, and then we're paying for electronic payment fees. So we're getting hit on both ends during COVID.
Right now,
okay.
Unfortunately, yes, due to COVID, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just curious, what's your collection rate?
Our collection rate for our, I'll say, monthly bills is approximately 70% within 30 days, and then the remaining 30% trickles out there over the next 60 to 90 days. So we do pretty well. We're pretty aggressive on collections, and also keep in mind, due to COVID, we cannot shut residential customers. Doesn't matter how much of a water bill they owe us. So even with that, we're not doing too bad. Actually, our collections since COVID started have gone up. We're at about 108% each month of our typical history for previous years during each month period. For instance, in February, we're about 108% over what we collected last February, January, December. So we're doing well on our collections. I just wish we could be more aggressive, but we understand that everybody's dealing with this hardship.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item number 9. Can you explain the Neptune Technology Group?
Yes, Neptune Technology is for our water meters. Providence Water obviously has a water meter in every customer that we have, all 75,000 customers, residential and commercial. We typically have a replace rate of 10 to 15 years to make sure that we're collecting accurate dollars for the water that's being used. We went out to bid. We had, I believe, 3 different vendors that quoted us prices, and the lowest bidder this time around was Neptune. We currently have Badger, Neptune chopping their pencils, and they were the low bid based on the quantities and sizes of meters that this contract and this award is for. It's for our smaller meters, which are 5/8 to 2 inches in size. They were the low bidder.
Mr.
The
Pelosi,
3-year contract.
does using different vendors, does that cause any type of continuity process for these types of meters? Like, are there any proprietary, I don't know, interest or software or something involved in these meters?
No, typically it's not the meter, it's the reading device, and as long as the ERT, which is on the existing Badger meters, works as it should on the Neptune meters, we wouldn't have a problem. And we obviously tested the Badger and, the Neptune meters with our Itron ERTs to make sure that we had no reading issues or consumption numbers fluctuating, and everything was as it should be. So we tested it before we took their word that it would work.
Great, glad to hear that. Well, it's good, because if you get too caught up in a proprietary type of interest, then we can never enter into a competitive bid process. It'll always be a one-sided conversation, so that's good. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on that item?
No, Mr. Chair.
We have a
Motion to recommend approval of items 6, 7, 8, and 9.
Yep. Do I have a second? By Councilman Castillo. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Water Supply
Thank you,
Board. Be
members.
well. Be safe.
Thank you.
Keep up the job making, I guess, America's second best water, but I know you're working on making it America's #1 best water, right? Right? Is that the goal?
We're trying.
Did I get that right? Right?
Every
You
day.
don't like second best.
No,
I know,
no,
but it's still pretty impressive. You think about it, right? And
we appreciate that.
nationally, that's an impressive accomplishment, and that's great. That's great to know, and people of Providence and everybody who uses the water should know that, So it's who
Thank
wants
you.
to be who wants to be the 50th best?
That's right.
Right? I mean, that's not like
Absolutely not.
I mean,
No, thank you.
Water is life. Water is important, and so keep up the good work. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you all.
And thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you, members.
Be well. So let's
Stay
take,
safe.
next item, let's take item number, is it number, let's see. Item number 5 out of order, please.
So moved.
By Vice Chair, second by
Second.
Councilwoman Castillo. Discussion. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Madam Clerk, item number 4, please. Excuse me, item number 5.
An ordinance supplementing ordinance chapter 2018, and approving the issuance of not to exceed $100,290,000 general obligation bonds, notes, and other evidences of indebtedness to the capital improvement plan.
Great, all right. And I think we have, is it Mr. Mancini and Ms.
Yes.
Lindberg, and I believe that's who's going to testify on this item. Is that right? Well,
Mr. Chairman, good evening, and before you swear us all in, I do have other associates, city affiliates, and outside advisors this evening that will participate with your permission and consent to testify. They include, in addition to myself, Ms. Lindberg and Ms. Silveria, it'll be Mr. Demo Roberts, who is now the CIP manager, taking the duties from Ms. Jordan Day, who has left city government. Mr. Joe DeSanti, who is the OPM associated with Downs Construction, which is the advisor to the projects. I also am joined this evening by Mr. Adam Cray from Hilltop Securities, the fiscal advisor on the transaction, and Ms. Ellen Corneau from Savage Law Associates, which will be legal counsel to the transaction. If I could have all of them join the meeting, Mr. Chairman, and be sworn in, I would appreciate it. And they will be, along with myself, available to answer any and all questions associated with the transaction.
Great, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chair,
I guess,
promoted them all to panelists.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Have all their names.
Thank you, sir.
Cameras on. I did promote Mr. Cray, but I do not see him yet.
I believe he'll only be attending by audio, Madam Clerk.
Okay, I did promote him to a panelist. Mr. Cray, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Madam Clerk. Can you hear me?
Yes. Would you like me to proceed with the swearing in?
Yes, please, Madam Clerk.
If everyone can raise their right hand, please. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do. Lawrence Mancini, Chief Financial Officer, City of Providence.
I guess we'll go with Mr. Roberts. Can you state your name for the record? And who do you work with?
Hey, Demo Roberts. I am now the CIP program manager.
Thank you, sir. Is it Miss Corneau? Am I saying it right?
My name is Ellen Corneau, and I'm a partner with Savage Law Partners, now in Providence.
Okay, and then Mr. DeSanti?
Joseph DeSanti, Director of Project Manager, Downs Construction.
And then Mr. Cray, right?
Yes, Adam Cray. I'm a managing director at Hilltop Securities
Okay.
in Lincoln,
and-
Rhode Island.
Thank you. And is anybody else that's it, at this time, going to testify in this matter?
Ms. Silveria.
Oh,
and
Ms.
Lindberg.
Silveria Lindberg, Ms. Silveria, can you state your position? Oh, she froze, so we'll go with Ms. Lindberg. Ms. Lindberg? Ms. Lindberg, can you state your name?
Crystal Lindberg, Deputy Finance Director.
Great. Ms. Silveria, can you hear us?
Sarah?
She's frozen. She's frozen at this time. She'll probably have to sign back on. So Madam Clerk, when she comes back on, please let her in. All right, so who wants to take the lead on this? Mr. Messini, why don't you quickly talk about what is this for? Why is the city doing it, and what is this for? Let's do that first, then we can get into the financial machinations, all right? Let's make it simple for us, okay?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you on this matter. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this transaction had its genesis from this very body granting approval to appear on the 2018 election ballot, and with overwhelming approval on an 8-to-1 basis, voters approved a tranche of $160 million of bonding authority. To date, none of that authority has been taken in the way of bond issuance. Of that $160 million, Mr. Chairman, prior to that approval on the ballot, the Finance Committee and the City Council agreed to do so with a provision in that ordinance that at such time as we would borrow the money under due diligence, we would return back before the council and before this committee to seek your approval out of committee to do the actual bond transaction. So under 160 million, Mr. Chairman, is in two parts. We were approved by RIDE under what's called PAYGO, which is the modern method of the School Building Authority, where it's based on revolving the funds of the city and the School Building Authority to do the first portion of 60 million. That condition precedent was placed upon the city as all other communities because the state had borrowed in excess of $250 million during the same period that the city was approved for 160. So state officials felt that communities were required to absorb those funds first before they borrowed independent of the state. We did that, and we're pleased to say that our contribution of that 60 million is under the typical 82%, 18% formula that we have always operated under as a distressed community, given our reimbursement percentage. With that, Mr. Chairman, the remainder of the authority necessary to complete $160 million of projects will be taken in a bond issuance of $100,694,346. The transaction is structured under a timeline that will close ideally, Mr. Chairman, by the end of May. May 27th is the anticipated bond closing. Between this evening and that date, a series of events must take place. They include recommendation of your consideration for approval out of committee this evening, dual passage by city council as it is an ordinance, and we must return back to RIBEC for final approval. We gained preliminary approval at the March meeting of RIBEC by having this matter entered into the record, entered into the docket with the council's blessing. We were able to go to RIBEC, and they had, by unanimous vote, given us preliminary approval to borrow the 160 million, in this case 100 million with reimbursement. We will be doing a rating call during the month of April, and we will be back to RIBEC on April 21st, securing that approval if in fact we have second passage of this matter by the city council. At that point, we will be mailing the preliminary operating statement on April 30th. We'll be pricing the bonds on May 13th, and we'll be closing on the bonds on May 27th, all things considered. Mr. Cray and the Hilltop Securities team has done a bond pricing on the transaction. With that said, Mr. Chairman, we expect that the bond cost of issuance and underwriting costs will total $768,000 on a $100 million bond, approximately 0.0076% of the bond. And today, all things considered, if pricing was to occur today, we probably would be looking at a true interest cost projected to be approximately 2.6%. We are borrowing under historic conditions, Mr. Chairman, and this is phase one of ultimately two phases of school bond borrowing. I'd like to remind the committee that subsequent to the 2018 voter initiative that was approved, the city went back out to bond question in November of 2020 for 140 million. That too received overwhelming public support. So the combined wherewithal of the city between the $160 million first tranche and the 140 million totals $300 million of projects that will be that have been approved by RIDE or will be certainly contemplated with RIDE's secondary approval on the 140 million. Before you this evening is a project list of 160 million and how that 160 million has been laid out, basically by the name of the project, the dollar amount, and the priority areas of where it's being spent on. Mr. Joe DeSanti, who was hired as the OPM under a properly advertised and properly solicited and properly awarded contract with Downs Construction, is with us this evening to testify on that project, has done an outstanding job with a project cash flow and a timeline. And Mr. Adam Cray will testify, Mr. Chairman, to the... Yep.
Madam Clerk, do you have that list?
If it's not in the ordinance, then I don't have
It's not in the ordinance, so I just got handed it from committee members. Lisa, how can you get this to whatever the website? How are you doing it? Can I do that? Anybody? Nobody. Okay.
I don't know how to do it.
All right,
Can we
so
see it on the screen, Mr. Chair?
I guess we'll try.
Send it to me in an email.
All right, they're gonna send it to you. All right, Mr. Mancini, continue. I'm sorry, sir. Continue.
It's okay. So, Mr. Chairman, the transaction was constructed with specific efficiency because we're looking to take advantage of the timeline necessary to maximize construction duration and timing it with optimum reimbursement so that the city's cash flow outlay eventually will be only its share, which is roughly 18 cents on the dollar. And with bonus awarding points, we stand to be reimbursed upwards of 90 or 91%. With that, when the transaction closes in this fiscal year in May, with the blessing of the council, there will be capitalized interest as part of the project, which will cover the interest carrying costs for the remainder of fiscal 22. And there will be a provision for interest-only payments in 23. The first real payment with net of reimbursement from Rybeck under the minimum formula of 8218 will be in 2024 at a cost to the city then net 1.5 million per year for the remaining 18 years. And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I submit to you that that is the most efficient bond borrowing that you'll see in a transaction, again, taking advantage of historic interest rate, a low interest rate market. So Mr. Cray is here to provide additional details, and I'm happy to share more of that with you. And Mr. Demo Roberts can speak to the project list. This list has been developed over a considerable period of time. As you know, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ms. Day, who recently left government, had mastered these project lists as part of her daily duties. And so we've transferred those responsibilities now to Mr. Roberts, and he certainly can provide information, and I'm going to be here to assist him with any information that I can share with respect to the project list and the timeline on that. But I do want to say that the city's contribution under the $60 million pay-go portion, which would normally be about $11 million, will be captured in bond premium on this closing. We expect, and legal counsel will attest, we expect to earn upwards of 10% or greater or sufficient $11 million in bond premium that will near equal the city's requirement match on the pay-go. So under a $60 million pay-go money from the state, 48 million change from the school building authority, the balance comes from the city. We will be using the bond premium to meet that match so that we've completed that transaction, and it will not impact on the power amount, or it will not impact on the future reimbursement under RIDE and RIDEBEC. So these are all good points of consideration, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and I welcome your questions. And as I said, I have my advisors here on the committee meeting to give testimony where appropriate.
All right, thank you. What I think, Mr. Mancini, if you have what you just stated about the numbers, the actual financial numbers.
Yes.
Do you actually have that on like a?
I do, Mr. Chairman. I believe it was shared with your internal auditor by Ms. Day, but if that.
Hang on. Before we go that, do you have it available right now that maybe you could put it onto your screen so that committee members can see? That's the first thing. And Mr. Roberts, do you have the school capital plan project list, and do you have it on your computer? Can you share it? You have it?
I have it now.
Okay, so.
I can share it.
All right, so why don't you share that? And then I have Councilman Anthony, and then Vice Chair Ryan.
Yes.
As a question.
So
let's do.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask a question, could I have Mr. Craig, Mr. Craig, can you secure the March 10th memorandum that was sent to me? Is that something that you can send by email to the clerk?
Yes, I have it right here. I will send it over.
So you need to send it to T. Mastriani at providenceri.gov.
I'll do that right now.
And I'm sure you have the correct spelling on that, do you not?
Right there.
Luckily, I can see it on the screen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ryan?
Thank you,
I mean,
Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman Anthony, I'm sorry. Councilwoman Anthony?
I believe that the vice chair had her hand up first, so I will.
That's quite all right. I'll yield to you, Councilwoman.
All right.
I was just
All right.
saying this is a very difficult conversation. While I understand the description of the bonds and the how that's very advantageous right now, it's hard to look at this without any documents.
My
Some
apologies.
audio visuals. Some demonstrative evidence help, I think. Right?
My apologies on behalf of all of us, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I was of the opinion that it was already furnished because we were scheduled to appear last week as well, so I apologize for that.
I don't know. Well, we'll get there. Vice Chair Ryan?
Thank you, Councilman Anthony. You and I are like-minded. I too like to see the documentation of what we're asked to vote on. But I did see the list to Mr. Mancini. Jordan had kindly circulated it prior to this matter appearing before us. So I have seen it. I do have an email. I'd like to suggest, Mr. Chair, if we can just stand at ease on this item or just move to an item, continue this matter, revisit it once we get the documentation. Time is of the essence. Obviously, we passed this, the residents passed it in 2018. We need to move along on it. I just would hate to see any further delay. So if we could get the clerk, the documents, the list, and I believe a fiscal note is what you're asking, because I too would like to see the cost of issuance. I'd like to see the numbers worked out on the cost of bonding, as well as I'd like to see the premium that we're earning on this tonight. So if that is possible, well, I see we have the list, so we're getting there. Can we get the, Mr. Mancini, can we get the fiscal note or the math
Yes,
on this transaction?
Madam Lead, it's appearing on the screen now, and in the body of the note, it does reference the premium that has been projected by Hilltop Securities. And it also shows you, I believe, if there's a secondary page, it shows you the cost of issuance. Mr. Cray, is that in that document or was that in a separate document?
That was in a separate document, but I can send that over as well.
Thank you so much.
Why don't we, everybody hang on for a second, okay? All right, so let's think about timing. Even if the Finance Committee approves this evening, it will not go before until the next council meeting, which is when? Madam Clerk?
The next council meeting is April 15th, sir.
Right, so for the sake of conversation, if we did have a little more conversation, continue this matter to the next finance meeting, would it make it to the next council meeting?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it would, as long as it's heard before April 9th.
Just want to make sure the committee understand that option. The reason why I'm saying is that I think what happened, what's going on with Zoo in particular, because we don't have, normally when you're here live and in person, everybody's forced to bring all the papers and have everything, and then you can disperse it and you're there and need copies. The problem with Zoom is everybody's doing a lot of assumption, that they think everything's presented or everything's ready to go. And as I've had in my experience, every time I've had a finance committee meeting, there's always something missing or an exhibit or something. But when you're physically there, you can solve that problem, and committee members have an opportunity to access it. So I would suggest if you want to have a little more conversation, committee members, but I think, we are going to take up the budget. My question is, would you want to continue to the next finance meeting? I'm going to give you the option. And this way, everybody can have all the paperwork, and we can make sure we understand what we have. And the public has a right to see this a little bit earlier than just simply popping it up right now. That gives me pause and concern, too. So, or do you want to just plow through this and then, it's 6 o'clock. We do have the budget, so I'm just mentioning to committee members. So, actually, Mr. Mancini, although you are an ex officio committee member, I am polling my committee members first. So, what's the committee members' pleasures? What are you thinking? What would you like to do?
I think we should plow through it tonight. I think it's so important.
Yeah, and I'm going to say the same. May I just speak, Mr. Chairman? Because thank you, Vice Chair. I just looked at my email. And we have this sent to us. We have all these documents. They were sent on the 24th and again by Matt Showmate yesterday. So that was my fault. So we have all the documents.
We do, but to the chairman's note, and it's very important that what we do is transparent and open to the public for review and scrutiny. And the chairman is basically articulating that while we have it, or we're struggling to see it on the screen or on our phone or however, it wasn't posted with this meeting.
Right.
And that, is what he's concerned about. I do think that I think time is of the essence. I think that if your committee is amicable, I'd like to try to plow through it, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chair, this evening. If everybody else is okay.
Well, it's the committee members, that's what I'm concerned about this time, all right? All right, so let's do this first. Madam Clerk, do you have the school capital plan project list?
I do.
Okay, so let's enter that into the official record, and then we'll enter into the other items. Can we enter this as Exhibit 1, item number, what are we on? Item 5?
5. So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Second.
All right, discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Carried. Just so we understand, it's a 2-page list. Actually, it says Phase 1 and Phase 2. Madam Clerk, do you have a Phase 2?
I do.
All right, so that's part of the same exhibit, okay? All right, Phase 1 and Phase 2, I'm describing it. Next, I believe there was a letter or an email of some sort that talks about, basically, it's like the fiscal note, is that right?
There's a memorandum from Hilltop Securities, and I believe there's an additional supporting document that was sent to me either as part of that or separately. Mr. Cray is putting that up on the screen, I believe.
Mr. Craig, do you have that readily available?
Yes, I'm emailing it to the clerk right now.
Just for future reference, I know, it looks like we're gonna continue to be doing Zoom and team meetings for a little bit longer. Mr. Mancini, since you are the Chief Financial Officer, can you just advise all department heads to make sure that all paperwork, hard copies are delivered to the clerk's office for all committee meetings, prior to the committee meetings, and at least for the finance, because this is not the best way to go about doing this.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I would agree, and I apologize for any.
And let me say, although it gets emailed to committee members, it's important the clerks who clerk the meetings get it and get a physical copy, and they can print it out and they add it to the file, and vice versa. They have it readily available. Okay. So what is this item here? Is it a one-pager? A one-page document. So I enter this into the record, Madam Clerk. It's a one-page document and identified as Exhibit 2 to Item 5. It's from Hilltop Securities, from Adam Cray, dated March 10th, 2021, stating school construction project. And I presume it's how do you describe this document, Mr. Craig? What do you call this?
This is how the bond issue is sized, how we get down to the 100,690,000.
Okay, what I'm saying, do a motion to that effect in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Vice Chair, second. Councilman Steele, discussion, all in favor? Aye. Those items are entered. All right, so you want to very quickly, why don't you bring up that Exhibit 2, Madam Clerk?
I also have a memo from Mr. Craig. I just have to open it before I share.
Okay. Just one page, is that right now?
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, the first document was a document that showed how the project the bonds was sized and how it was built around the pay-go and that portion of it. And this is the memorandum that supports the cost of issuance, underwriting fees, and the projection on what the total interest cost would approximate in this transaction.
All right, so let's identify it as Mr. Mancini identified this document and make it Exhibit 3 to Item 5.
So moved.
Second.
Council Castillo, discussion, all in favor? Aye. So this, very quickly, can you get that document up, Madam Clerk? So these, so the fees are, I'm looking for the, is the total fees 300 no, was the total fees $346,400? Am I reading that right?
743,340.
Okay. And can you, can you explain, what is it,
Yeah, so-
396, 34 are those fees, and then you add the underwriter, their counsel and expenses of 346,400, which gives you a grand total of 743,340, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. What's the SBA fee? Can you explain what that is?
That's a school building authority. That's a fee that they assess on a transaction that's associated with what's called PAYGO, Mr. Chairman. These are the funds that are coming from the state's portion of funds that were approved by voters for the state to borrow to fund projects like ours here in the city of Providence, and they take their fee associated with the sizing of the PAYGO amount.
What does the School Board Association do for $100,000?
It's built into their authority. The school building authority is the authority that was carved out of the RIDE financing portion of the transactions, and they are exclusive to these to the modern bond borrowing PAYGO revolving fund contribution by the community or the city or town, and payment from the bonds that were borrowed by the state. The state put it under their authority, school building authority.
I still don't know, what are we paying for, and is it mandatory?
Yes, it is. It is mandatory.
By what? Like, what are they doing for that money, for $100,000?
The school building authority, if I may, was created by statute into the law. Their authority was granted by General Assembly. Their role is to manage financing projects that are participatory by communities, by having the school building authority extend the portion of reimbursement that each community receives, by having the community put up their own funds and revolve those funds along with the contribution from the school building authority. They have to approve the projects, they have to monitor the projects, they have to record and reimburse the projects. They act as RIDE and RIDEBEC formally acted in this instance.
Are they an additional project manager?
They are an oversight and state regulatory agency associated with revolving fund borrowing of projects that have been approved for municipal spending.
So that,
Perhaps
now
Mr. Gray can give a more in-depth response.
What's the cost for, is it Rhode Island HEBC Financial Advisor? What is that for?
That's for Rhode Island Higher Education Building Corporation. And they too are an agency statutorily created by the General Assembly. And that's an agency that governs all of the transactions for school bond borrowing. You must seek their approval and gain their approval. And they are the agency that manages the funds upon reimbursement annually to every community who's been approved for school bond borrowing projects.
So now let me ask the next question. I see $50,000 for bond counsel. Is that the city's bond counsel, or is this someone else's bond counsel?
No, that's the city's bond counsel.
How about the city financial advisor? Is that Craig?
Yes, it is.
All right, and the bond counsel is Savage?
Savage Law Associates, yes.
Okay. The next question is, says underwriter, their counsels and expenses. So that's their legal counsel, right, for the underwriting, right?
Well, it's the underwriter's fee for putting together the transaction, for conducting the preliminary pricing arrangements, for conducting the actual market pricing on the day of the closing, and for really bringing together all of the co-managers to pre-sell and sell the securities in the open public market. That's what the underwriter gets paid for, generally by the size of the transaction, along with their counsel and any other cost of issuance.
A question of why do we have, it looks like you changed bond counsels. What happened? Did you guys put it out to bid? Is that what happened?
We worked off the Rybeck approved bond counsel list, Mr. Chairman, and the Savage Law Associates was on the city's approved list by the city solicitor. And it was an opportunity to engage another firm, given that this work is highly unique and there are only a couple of firms that really can do the work that that this requires. And Ms. Corneau has done this work on past occasions, and it was an opportunity for the city to have another firm participate with that work.
Do you do it in a mini bid process? In other words, how do we, are we getting the best value per hour, or what are we doing?
All firms are selected through a Rybeck process, and Rybeck has a list of revolving firms that are now available to any municipality that uses bond borrowing services.
Is the fee set, though? Is the fee set? That's my question.
I don't know if it's set. There may be a cap, but I don't know if it's set, Mr. Chairman.
Right. Any other comments or questions on this item, on this one? And we'll go to the next one. Treasurer, okay, Treasurer, what's your questions on that? And then we'll work backwards. Mr. Treasurer?
Mr. Chairman, in regards to that list, I noticed that the fiscal advisor was being paid $75,000. Although we went out to bid a number of years ago, that seems to be very high. I believe the going rate was $25,000 or $30,000. Remember, this is a no bid contract, and it's $75,000. I'd like to know if they reached out to. We have two fiscal advisors. If they reached out to the other one and had a discussion to see if they could beat this price.
So, Mr. Treasurer, we did not. This transaction had its origination more than a year ago, even during the height of the pandemic, when the bond issue was approved by the voters. We had already engaged Hilltop for their knowledge and their advice on this transaction. They had advised us through the entire transaction under the authority that was granted by the Board of Contract and Supply that was granted, I believe, sir, through your office. It was a bid that was put out by your office that either or of those firms could be used, and we continued with the service provided by Hilltop Securities. And the truth is, in November of 2019, Rybeck changed its process, and they no longer assigned fiscal advisors. And when they did that, basically they hire their own independent credit analyst, and the municipalities are now required to retain their own, which is in this instance we did with Hilltop Securities. At the time, Mr. Treasurer, I think you were referring to that Hilltop could price any transaction of a moderate size at no greater than a $50,000 cap. I think you and I may have had this discussion that would have been predicated on a bond issue less than $50 million, probably in the neighborhood between 25 million and 40 million, to be very frank with you. I don't think we've had occasion to price a bond issuance as high as $100 million, given the expense and the work associated with that. It seems that this is a fair and reasonable cap at 75,000. It could come in lower, but that's the cap that it would not exceed.
I thought that they capped it at 25,000.
No, the original cap was 50,000.
I don't think so, but you know what? If you didn't go out to bid on it or you didn't do it, the charter the Code of Ordinances requires that you detail the bill. So if you wouldn't mind detailing the hourly rate in the bill in regard to this matter, that seems to be very excessive.
I would have Mr. Cray and his team do just that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Madam. Thank you. Let's go to item number, let's go to the memorandum. Is it item number 2? Okay, Mr. Cray, do you want to explain this document?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. This document is basically an illustration of what Chief Mancini mentioned earlier in your meeting. In the top section of the chart in the middle of the page, you can see the state pay-go, the $48.9 million, because that represents 82% of the pay-go based on their reimbursement of 82%, that means the city needs to come up with just about $10.4 million for a total pay-go of a little over $59 million. This is the reason why the city will only be borrowing $100 million to do $160 million worth of projects, because the city does not have to borrow that $59.3 million. The city's $100 million bond issue is projected to generate enough bond premium in the current market to cover the city's $10.4 million in pay-go, the contributions the city must make to the project. So that's good news. That means your $100 million bond issue is going to be fully reimbursed by RIDE at 82%. Your projected debt service over the life of the bond issue would be a little over $26.5 million. So you'll be able to do $160 million worth of work for a lifetime projected debt service of $26.64 million. And I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Can you explain bond premium?
Yes, sir. In the current market, most bonds are priced at a premium. The reason for this is investors in a very low interest rate market often want to overpay, if you will, for the bonds. They'll pay you $110 for a $100 bond issue in order to have more income during the life of the bond. So they'll pay you $110 for a $100 bond, and you'll pay them what looks like a slightly higher interest rate. But at the end of the day, when you return the principal, you only return $100, not the $110 that they paid you. So your ultimate cost of borrowing is less, because even though you paid a little more interest, you paid 10% less in principal. It's a function of the market in a low interest rate environment, and it basically allows you to keep that extra $10, the 110 versus 100. It allows you to keep that extra $10 as premium, and you never repay that principal. That's how principal is generated in the tax-exempt bond market.
So at this time, because of this particular situation of the market today, right? And what's happening today, that's why we're getting this premium. Is that right?
That is correct. It's purely a function of the current market, and it's completely normal.
What's causing that? Is that causing people they feel that this is a safer investment? Can you explain that, please?
Many of the big buyers in the tax-exempt bond market are money market funds. And they want, there's a couple of reasons. One is tax reasons, and the second one is they want a certain stream of income, and they're often willing to pay a little more up front to have that ongoing higher stream of income. That's in a very low interest rate market environment that we're in right now. That's what buyers want. And over the years, the market has moved, to give the buyers what they want. So it's sort of a function of who the big buyers are and what they're interested in. And it's mostly a stream of income, higher interest. They're more interested in the interest than the principal.
If the market changes, well, is it the federal government changing the market rate? If that would cause the change?
Yes, exactly. As interest rates rise, it's highly likely that premium will go away. And eventually, if rates rise enough, Mr. Chairman, on a 5% coupon bond, you might have a 5%. It might truly be 5%. The market might go up, back up to 5%, in which case there'd be no premium. When I started 23 years ago in this business, there was no premium. The rates were high enough that a 5% or a 4% bond actually cost 4 or 5%, and there was zero premium.
So, Mike, when we go out to the market, does the fluctuation of the rate, does that have any impact after we go out? Or is it a one-time premium savings, or is it something as the market, let's say 2 years when the market goes up, just say wildly crazy, 5, 6, 7%, does that have an impact on us? And if so, what?
It does not. The good news is when we price the bond rate and the premium and everything is locked in at that time. So if we do this transaction in May, Mr. Chairman, once we lock it in, it's fixed. Nothing will change for the city over the 20-year life of the bonds.
So then it's locked in and that's that, okay? Any questions or comments on this item?
No,
All
Mr.
right,
Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Can we go to item 1, please? Is it item 1, which is phase 1 and phase 2? While we're looking for that, is it Ellen Cornier from Savage Law Firm?
Yes.
All right, so can you tell us what your role is in this process, and what's your role? And
Certainly. Bond counsel basically acts as the attorney for the bond transaction. So Rybeck is the issuer of the bonds in this case. The city is what's called the borrower, but the city also issues borrower bonds that are technically purchased by Rybeck. Rybeck's bonds are what is sold to the marketplace. My role is to basically make sure that all of the authority is in place for the issuance of the bonds, that the tax analysis to ensure that the bonds are tax exempt in the marketplace, saving you some money there, is correct, and that we issue a legal opinion at the closing of the bonds that basically is issued, which the marketplace relies on in purchasing the bonds. So part of my, go ahead.
When will that process, when will those, if the comes out of committee, then the council passes at the next council meeting, which is 2 weeks from now, when does the process begin and how long will it take for the issuance of the bonds to be sold?
The issuance of the bonds, it depends on the issuer and the complexity of the transaction, but we expect that this issuance gets passed out of committee, say this evening, goes to city council, takes 2 passages because it is an ordinance. It's actually an ordinance that's supplementing a prior 2018 ordinance. It has already received Rybeck initial preliminary approval. It will just need Rybeck's final approval. Looks like it's probably a couple-month process, and you hope you'll have your money in time to begin your projects when the students are out for the summer, so that you can maximize the construction season.
Well, I guess the question, then it's going to take a little more time. We're going to get to that when we talk to the project manager, because there's no way, we'll find out the stats of the RFPs. I don't know if they're all out. I don't know if they're, what's going on with them. So right now, what you can tell us is that the money will be available to be utilized in about 2.5 to 3 months.
Well, maybe no. Start to finish, we've already. There's been some movement on it already. So the money will be available end of May. Technically, right now, scheduled. I think closing is scheduled for the 26th, May 26th. Chief Mancini.
So the end of May.
Yes,
Right?
May 27th.
The money will be in the bank, ready to be used the end of May. Okay.
Correct.
Now we're going to jump over to the project management piece. That's how. Now we got that. Any comments or questions of the attorney this time? Okay. Now we'll bring in Mr. Roberts and Mr. DeSanti. And why don't you explain this list real quick? I guess, Mr. Roberts, since you inherited this.
Oh, so I did inherit this. I am 3 days on the job, so I am still going through all of this and processing it. So Mr. DeSanti has a little more knowledge than I do. So I think I'm going to give him the opportunity to speak here, if you don't mind, sir.
Perfect. No problem. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. DeSanti, are you there, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and council members, committee members.
So, Mr. DeSanti, just tell us very quickly, what is going to be your role in this process?
Our role is
your company.
Yeah, our role as the owner's project manager is multifaceted. We help with assisting with putting like some of these financial documents together. We will be assisting with the reimbursement process, the payment process, and with the hiring of contractors or architects as needed, which would mean, authoring RFPs if required. And any project that is under either design or construction, we also manage that process and take the leadership role and act in the interest of the city. So during the design process, we make sure that that all of the stakeholders, the principals, for example, are involved in the process, and that we follow the RIDE guidelines to ensure that we get reimbursement and the proper approval. We provide updates to the school building committee, and then ensure that we are getting the right good quality construction documents. And once we get into construction, not only are we overseeing to make sure financially that we stay within budget, but we stay on schedule. And we also oversee and review the project to make sure that the quality products are being installed and they're being constructed in concert with what the design documents had called for.
Talk about that. Are all the design plans put together for all these projects in phase 1 and phase 2?
No, phase 1 projects are approved right now, the 160 million. The 140 million phase 2 is the one that has been submitted as the stage 1 application. So within that phase 1, approximately 11 schools are either in design or in construction. Of the 11, 5 of them are going through the design process right now, and 6 are either completing construction or in the process of construction right now.
Okay, so now this list we're looking at phase 1. Is this a work product from you and your company?
No, this is not.
Okay, so can someone update this work product so you can identify, that, hey, you just mentioned 11 out of this list here is in certain different stages of design, construction, and completion. And can we get a construction timeline for all the projects from the design piece all the way to when we think it's going to be completed? Do you have that for each one of these projects?
Yes, we have an overall draft cash flow that we've put together for Mr. Mancini and for Mr. Cray to utilize. This document you're looking at right now is part of the stage 2 approval and part of the MOA approval. They needed an overall understanding what the project was going to be.
Okay, so what I'm saying, so is there something, for example, when I look at windmill, right now that's 30,500,000. Like, is that in a design phase? Is that in a construction phase? Where is that?
That right now is in the development phase. So there was a document that was shared, and I can reshare it tonight as well.
No, I know. I'm not asking you to do that right now. What I wanted to do, what I'd like you to do is this. What I'd like you to do is put together an easy readable document, whether you want to use this as your blueprint. And although we may pass this out of this meeting, I'm going to ask you to come back to the finance committee next week to give us a breakdown on each and every one of the projects, where it is, whether it's design, it's not design, it's getting with design, and then the construction timeline, meaning, right, you got the budget, when hopefully design will be complete, when the RFP will be posted, hopefully when you get awarded, when the construction begins, when substantial completion occurs, when completion begins, and when acceptance, right? So there must be something like that in each one of these projects, I think, right?
Yes, and we could provide that.
I'm assuming, right? So
yes.
Can you provide that for next week for each one of the projects? And anything else that I am missing, meaning this, I don't know what I don't know, so just because I didn't ask you the question, what I'm asking you to do is, with a client, give us all the pertinent information we need to know about soup to nuts on each one of these projects, okay? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay? Okay, so this way, council members and the public has an understanding, oh, okay, classical is on track, we spent half the money, it's being built, I don't know what it is. And also, what's happening at that location, right? Are we putting a roof on, are we doing whatever we're doing, okay?
Yes.
Also, now, does your company, do the inspections of the construction process?
There's a couple of levels of inspections. So you have your building officials at the city will do inspections. The architect or design team will do their inspections. And then you will have specific inspections for like concrete, where you're going to have independent different inspectors. Now we, as the OPM, we do visual inspections as well. We walk each of the projects as they're under construction, and we note any deficiencies, or we stop any work that we believe might be deficient, and we notify the proper individuals. So there is field inspections that we do as well.
Is there a project manager for each one of these projects? Or is you have a project manager and you're assigned for 5 of the projects?
Depending on the project size, it could be one individual or an individual assigned to a number of them.
And are they doing daily record? Are they doing dailies? Are they doing pictures and dailies? What are they, if you call up the project manager, will they be able to say, yes, on Friday, they're going to be putting the new roof on? Like, are you doing that type of job?
Yes, we are. Our individuals that work for our organization that are assigned to the projects do daily reports as they visit the sites, as well as take photos. And when they're into design, we also have notes about where we are in that process as well.
So then the next question I have for you is when you have inspectors come in, you're saying they're not your inspectors. Whose inspectors are they? Yes.
Well, there'll be a number of them. So there will be some specific inspectors if we're ever doing any kind of concrete work where a concrete inspector would come in. It'd be an independent third party that we would hire to come in that would do testing, for example.
So I mean, I'm saying it's your inspectors. Under the umbrella of the contract the city has with your company, you hire the inspectors to do the inspections, right? Whether it's concrete, asphalt, right? All that kind of stuff, electrical, whatever's going on in the project.
No, we wouldn't hire we do in the field inspections we would do, but when it comes to any technical inspections like testing of concrete or any city officials would be doing any of the inspections as well during that process. That would be either the city or a third party that would come in to do that.
So are the third parties hired by you or by the city separately?
By the city.
And are you managing those third party inspectors?
Yes.
And are you maintaining a record of those inspectors and who's out there, when, where, and how, and what their inspection is gleaming? Meaning, if the cement fails, they go out there. Someone sends the concrete has to be at so much psi. Hopefully, they're going to pour an entire whatever they're going to do. Someone out there inspects it, pulls a sample, gets it tested. And then if it comes back that, nope, it's not the right PSI, you got to pull the floor or fix it, right? How
Correct.
does that process?
Yeah,
Who manages that process?
We would manage that process. We would manage any of the third-party independent inspectors. And you basically just outlined it. So if there's a deficiency, we would know about it immediately and would ask for that work to be resolved, whether it would be the removal or some other means sometimes to resolve that issue. But there will be test results for anything like that. And those test results would be part of the project record as well. And the resolution to it.
So, okay, great. And so are you guys using any type of software system like for RFIs, request information, or anything like that? So if the contractor runs into an issue, has questions, do they just do it verbally? Do they do it in writing? Do they do it on a software system? How are you handling that?
We utilize a software system called Procore, which is a information management software which tracks all of those things, including the field reports, including photos and any deficiencies or anything like that.
Correct. So basically, on any given project, a city official could get the password, get onto the account, look at that project and see what's happening out there from photos, inspections, status, payment, what's payments out there, retainage, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't have the payment process in there yet, but I've been working with Mr. Roberts. We actually talked about it this morning, and we're working on a system to do exactly that. We do monthly reporting right now, and that's one of the things we want to incorporate as well, to be able to go to one site to be able to get all of that information.
So right now you don't have the software set up for that at this point. Is that right? Your software system doesn't have that element yet.
We have it, but we haven't shared that link to be able to track the financial part of it. So right now it's being done outside of that system, and we're working to incorporate that. So we do have the tracking for the financials. It's just not included with the Procore, because that's a whole separate type of system.
And are you going to be doing that? You said you are going to make that one system or simple system?
Yes, and
right?
Demo, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, sure. So just in my time here, the question is valid. We are, and I do have samples of what we're going to use. We are planning to have a system that can be a shareable link for all to have, that you can see real life photos, videos, you can store documents. Also, you can see financials. So yes, we do have that in place right now. I do have samples of it. We're still working on it currently, but I feel by the next time we meet or prior to that, we should have something in place for review.
Right. Mr. Roberts, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So we have a little technical difficulty on my side. So let me continue with this. Is there going to be retainage withheld in each one of these projects?
Yes.
And will there be a final closeout and a punch list before the retainage is? Okay. And how much is the retainage in each one? Are we holding 2%, 5%? What are we doing? Is it different, or is it all the same?
We're withholding at least 5 to 7.5%, and that will be reduced as the projects close out. But the final 2.5% will not be released until we have full closeout documentation, which would mean as-built documents, which is a documentation, a hard copy and electronic copy of what was constructed, as well as all the warranty and closeout owners manuals, those kind of things. And we have a process that we're putting in place where we're going to have sign off and make sure that we receive that information before final payment is made.
Are any of these projects completed at this time?
No.
Okay, but some of them have begun, you said, right?
Yes, of the 11, 6 of them are in some form of construction. There is actually all 6 are still in some form of construction still.
Okay, all right. If you can update that list, and then I'll have Vice Chair has a question, and then Councilman Anthony. Vice Chair?
Yes, could you identify the 6 that are near completion?
Sure.
Hope that's not me.
Not me.
This is not a test.
I think it's you, Mr. Chair.
We're at DEFCON 5.
Says we don't have fun.
And the invasion has begun. Take cover.
So the
government sheet is available.
All right, back to
appropriate follow-up justice.
All right, the 6 projects are Kazarian, Feinstein at Broad, Webster, Forts, and Lima, and Williams.
Okay, so one of the questions my chairman has already asked, and that was about contingencies or retainage on each of these projects. So I think that's great. First, can I ask what is the methodology? How did you comprise this list? What method did you use to get these names? They're not alphabetized. They're not by dollar amount. They're not by priority area. So I'm just confused as to how this list was put together. What was the method used?
I don't know. I didn't create the list. This was done as part of the 2019 MOA, and it was a document that was created as part of that process.
So there's no rationale. There's no priority based on who's first on the list or who's last on the list.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Is there any priority for the priority area of need? So urgent needs I see versus swing space, I see fire code. Is there any priority to getting to these projects or timing of these projects based on the need?
Yes, and we are actually working with PPSD to identify some of those priorities as they come up, and some of the projects may move up in the schedule. So yes, there is. And
so
we're
you are prioritizing. Yep.
Yeah, and we are doing that conjunction with Providence Public Schools.
Okay, good. And what about MEP? What does that mean? The first column?
Mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, HVAC systems.
Okay. All right. One of the things that I would like to see obviously this needs to be built out, and the chairman has already addressed that. But on this project plan, if you will, we'd like to see when the project is complete, what was actually spent, any residual dollars that are left over, because, we want to certainly keep track of that, as well as if there's an overage, what gets dropped off to account for that. So those are some of the things that we're going to want to see in detail.
Yeah, and we will do that. We are tracking costs right now. We're tracking overall budgets, and we'll provide, for next week's meeting, we'll provide a summary of all the projects on one sheet on a cash flow, and you could see that. It shows a schedule, it shows anticipated cash out, and it also shows when the projects are scheduled to be completed.
And what is a student-centric innovation?
So, for example, two good examples of that are Classical and Pleasant View. Both of those projects are getting new media centers, completely revamped, rethinking. So there's significant educational changes.
Okay. Does that bring them up to the other facilities, or is that above and beyond what the other facilities have?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I could find out for you and get back to you. I don't
Sure,
know.
next week when you come back to us. I just would like to know if it's a catch up or if it's, if they're standing out in front. That to me is kind of an interesting point to elaborate on. And then just a matter of procedure, if you will. So for tonight, Mr. Chair, phase 1 is the only piece of this that's applicable. Is that correct? To the matter before us. Phase 2 is not. So I don't.
That is correct.
I don't know if we need to pare that away from our attachment for clarity, but that's your call, Mr. Chair.
Well, I just have a question because in phase 1, in phase 2, there's only a couple of schools that he mentioned out of the 6, and in phase 1, the rest are in the phase 1. So I don't know. So I guess here's my question. If phase 1 is for $160 million, and it looks like 4 out of the 6 projects you mentioned, I believe, are in phase 1. Only 2 out of the 6 you mentioned are in phase 2. So that I don't know. Can you reconcile that with me? I guess, what's happening? I thought is the phase 1 list.
Oh, good point.
Is the phase 1 list for $160 million? Is that for the $160 million bond we're talking about, or what's going on? So what's happening here? So how's that? So that's my question for you. So, or do we use, I don't know, phase 2,
No, I
140
think,
million? I got,
I think
can someone-
they're on both lists, Mr. Chairman.
They're on both lists.
They're on both lists? No, Feinstein at Sackett's on phase 2. Feinstein at Broad is on phase 1.
Right.
He said
Mr.
Feinstein
Chairman.
at Broad. So let me finish. And then, so, I mean, and Lima is on both, right, and Fort. So I don't know, so can you reconcile? So you're telling me the phase 2, the Lima and Fort on phase 2 is not the same? I see Lima and Fort on phase 1, is that right? Mr. Roberts, is that correct, sir? You're muted, sir.
If I may, Feinstein's are 2 different schools. So you're going to see it 2 different times, just to clarify the Feinstein that you're seeing on it.
Okay, so let me ask this question. So the 6, you mentioned Lima, Fort, right? Feinstein and Broadway.
Kazarian, Webster, and Williams. Mr. Chairman, pardon me.
Mr. Chair, if I can clarify?
Yes,
May I?
please.
Thank
Yes,
you.
please.
So I guess the question for me is the project one of the 6 that is near completion? Is it Feinstein at Sackett or is it Feinstein at Kazarian? Because Feinstein at Sackett is in phase 2, and there's Feinstein at Broad.
Yep.
Madam Leader, if I may, Mr. DeSanti testified as follows: Kazarian, Feinstein at Broad, Webster, Fort, Lima, and Williams.
Okay, perfect. You answered the question. So all of the 6 are within phase 1, correct?
Thank you, Madam Leader.
Okay. That's fine. That answered my question. But so phase 2 doesn't apply to what's before us. So has been made an attachment. I don't know.
Okay, so just for my edification, so phase 2 right now, nothing's on those projects, and those projects will be done with what money? To clarify.
Mr. Chairman, when the opportunity presents itself, we will take that against the $140 million tranche that was approved in November of 2020 by voters.
Okay, so then in phase 1, you got 6 schools. If those 6 schools represent the $160 million that's in front of us, but you have not issued those bonds yet, where did you get the money to begin these 6 school projects?
Under the revolving fund use of the PAYGO. We've already been approved for PAYGO, and we've been drawing against those funds and revolving our own ability to advance cash until the bond closes.
Did we use any of the $140 million from the previous one for these 6 schools?
No, we did not.
Okay. Have we done, why haven't we addressed the first 140? What's happening with them?
Well, we're seeking authority only this evening under the very first voter approved bond issue, which was the $160 million.
Okay, all right. Councilman Anthony?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of my questions were answered with the answers to the vice chair's questions, so I appreciate that. I guess, I too have some questions regarding how this list was created. I mean, it's really hard to tell from this. Again, urgent needs, very, very vague. I wish we had some sort of idea of how these projects were prioritized. I personally have a question about why Windmill is being brought back on at $30,500,000. So I just wish there was someone that would be able to explain how these were prioritized and how this list was developed.
So I think, Councilman Anthony, next week I'm gonna bring back Mr. DeSanti, Mr. Roberts, and whoever from Mr. Mancini, whoever, and maybe we can go through each one of these and have those questions answered, because I'd like to also have this list updated anyway. So I think that so Mr. Mancini, Mr. Roberts, Mr. DeSanti, can you be prepared for next week to answer that particular question that Councilman Anthony mentioned, and to refresh everybody's recollection how this began, how you know, how did it decide this would be urgent? Like she said, this is a fire code, this is swing space, and et cetera. I think that's what she's, so we need to have that backup and explanation. And I know, Mr. Roberts, you just got on the job, so I'm not, that's why we're not putting you on the spot. We recognize that, you know, okay?
We have high hopes for him for next week.
Thank you.
Yeah, we do have, right.
Definitely.
All right, so it's this document, right? Yep. Treasurer?
Oh,
You have a question?
I do.
Okay.
Ready? So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for bringing them back. I just want to clarify what is going on. So, we're borrowing $100 million. There is this document that's on the screen that whoever is spending the money may or may not follow. So, you bringing them back and having meetings with them is very important. If you recall, in regards to the CIP or the bond, the last bond, the auditor has been asking for these documents since September. We did receive them last week, only because this bond is being floated. But there is no requirement to follow these documents. Obviously, there's a goodwill requirement, but we don't know if they are being followed. The other thing is that the last bond was floated by the PPBA, which means that it does not come through Treasury, any expenses. And so we don't know, again, how those dollars are being spent. So a meeting next week would be great, Mr. Chairman. I think that's very responsible. And then ongoing meetings to make sure that that we're following what the projection is, or at least explain why we're not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So next week will hopefully be an eventful versus an uneventful conversation. Madam Internal Auditor?
Yes, Mr. Chair, to follow up with what the treasurer said, I don't understand why this bond can't be followed the way the CIP bond is and put it online and make it public so we don't have to keep asking these questions. It was agreed by the previous public property director that everything would go online. It was totally transparent. I just think that this falls into that same category. That's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Well, if I may say, I mean, Vice Chair, and then I'll comment. Vice Chair, you have a question?
Just to affirm what the treasurer and our auditor has just stated, I think transparency is really important. And getting the, there was an overwhelming vote to fix our school facilities. We want to make sure we're doing them as efficient, making those changes and adaptions to, like, I mean, we talked about media and technology. We need to get our schools up to speed so that they're appropriate and provide the best learning opportunity for our kids. Transparency is really critical here. So to the auditor's point, we labored to get the information out of the CIP, how it was being spent, when it was being spent, if there was dollars overspent or underspent, what was happening with that money. So I just think that it should be posted online. It should be visible and easy to get. The very fact that we're here today and we had to struggle to get the project list in front of us, and as well as the fiscal notes in front of us is troubling. So we recognize the importance. I just think that we need to make sure that we're being transparent in all of our actions relative to these. This is a big spending on these schools, and it's an important expenditure. So I'm with the auditor, and I support the treasurer's comments as well. Thank you.
Okay, so, I mean, actually, it's actually a pretty easy solution. I mean, you can do it right now. And what it is because there's an ordinance before us, we can amend the ordinance stating that they do the appropriate accounting measures or, reporting measures to the internal auditor and the treasurer. as they begin the process to identify the projects and go through the spending process. And can make it, and without having any impact on this ordinance, but also having a positive impact on giving the public an opportunity to understand where the money's going, how it's going to be spent, and then they know there's always going to be some type of reporting requirement based on the ordinance. So we could do that.
I think that's a great idea.
I mean, that there is an easy solution. What I would suggest is if people, is the city solicitor online? I believe he is.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Is there a friendly amendment or something that we could put together just to add to talking about just having that when they identify the projects, they will do an appropriate quarterly reporting of some sort and present it to the council, the internal auditor, and the treasurer as we move along on the projects. So it's a lot easier. And I know kind of we're doing it, and this is why I did have some concern, but since we're going to plow through this, then I'm going to stay with it now. So I would have dealt with it last week, but now this is one of my concerns. So now we're gonna have to craft something. My feeling is we should craft something now, get some level of comfort of, as you mentioned, transparency, accountability, so everybody knows what's happening. The public knows, oh, what's happening with the 160? This was going, okay, great. So a simple reporting requirement, and it wouldn't inhibit any aspect of it. Just simply would say that as the projects are being identified, something like, Mr. Solicitor, think about it, something like as the city begins the process to identify the school projects to be identified, it will provide and present in a quarterly fashion the progress of each project and have all the appropriate financials and statements and accounting associated with it and provided in a quarterly manner to the city solicitor, the internal auditor, and city treasurer. Something like that might be something to think about. I think, but Shay, you have your hand up, and then Councilman Anthony. So I'm just mentioning something.
I'm sorry, I meant to put my hand down. I wouldn't mind a friendly amendment, just ask if we can do that to this ordinance. I recognize it's a bond, an ordinance that authorizes a bond, and I know that there are some restrictions or limitations, but I would ask our solicitor if there was a friendly amendment that we could add that would add a reporting component as the chairman expressed. Nothing elaborate, but.
I asked Ellen, Councilman Anthony, then I asked from Savage, because this way we don't have any issues. Councilman Anthony, of course. You're muted.
All right, that's what I was going to say, Mr. Chairman. I mean, it may be,
Yeah, no problem. I respect that. Yep. So, I mean, we can always pass an additional ordinance later on if we have to, but Ms. Corner, could we add something to this or that would not have any inhibition or cause any problems? So JC is just an accounting measure saying, as they begin the process to spend the money, draw down on the accounts, that there will be an appropriate accounting and submitted to all the appropriate stakeholders, and et cetera, et cetera.
I would love to be able to say yes to that. I mean, I don't have any problem with the concept of providing, whatever you need to be comfortable with. This ordinance right now that we're passing now is because the prior ordinance also had some conditions, one of which is to have to come back to the council with an ordinance once the bonds are being issued. So in order to be able to give a clean opinion, a good bond opinion, you'd like to be able to rely on an ordinance that didn't have additional conditions. If you were to put something in this ordinance, I would like to make sure, first of all, I'd like to review the language, of course, that gets drafted or help with the drafting of it. But I would also like to have a statement in there that said something to the effect that, however, the provisions of this section do not invalidate any bonds issued pursuant to this ordinance, does not affect the validity of any bonds, issued under this, something like that.
How does this sound? So people don't feel like no one's being an obstructionist, et cetera, et cetera. And although there's 2 weeks out before we actually go to the full council anyway. That even if we pass it out of committee, that before the first passage, we can do the friendly amendment on the floor. And you guys can craft the appropriate language so it doesn't cause any consternation for the bond council, for administration, and for the assistant, and also my council colleagues. And basically, it's just an accountability condition. Well, creating, making sure you're gonna get the money, how you're gonna spend it, and make sure you have an accounting of it. I mean, I can't imagine that would be a big problem. In fact, I think it would bring greater relief to the bondholders, knowing that there's going to be greater transparency and financial accountability in any issuance of bonds. See, Mr. Mancini?
Mr. Chairman, with complete agreement, I have no objection to full transparency in any transaction. So not only as a means of testimony this evening to assure council and council members that that's the a prerequisite, I would recommend, if you will be so kind, to take the necessary action to vote it out of committee this evening, and I will work with the internal auditor, the treasurer, and bond counsel and solicitor to structure the language that is not prohibitive, but clearly transcends the transparency that we all need, and I think that would be appropriate, highly appropriate.
Committee members, you fine with that?
I
Does that
think
make
that's a
sense?
perfect solution.
I do too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, and
Well done.
I think it worked, right? And then, okay. So we went through the chart, we went through that. We're gonna bring back Mr. Roberts and Mr. DeSanti next week to go through the phase one chart in more detail and where we are with all those projects, right? We're also, I guess we're gonna look to probably do is there any more questions on the ordinance?
No, Mr. Chair.
You have something, Madam Treasurer? I mean, internal audit, yes or no?
Not on this issue, but at some point, you can bring them back on the SIP and those types.
Oh, yeah, that's a separate, we can do that. We can bring you back on the SIP too, but let's do one thing at a time. So what I would suggest to the committee is that we make a motion to recommend approval item number 5 with the condition that Mr. Mancini, bond counsel, internal and treasurer work together to put the appropriate friendly amendment that will be added at the next, when it goes to the council meeting, which will create the accountability and financial accountability and public accountability on how the dollars are spent and how the proper reporting will occur as money is spent. And then, it's this way, it's in law, it's concrete, and no one can say, I forgot, I didn't know, I'm not ready. And this way, we kind of get away from all that conversation. It's just like, well, this is what the law is, everybody has notice, and you just need to do it. Right?
So moved.
Is that okay?
Second.
Second.
Thanks, Second, Councilor Taylor. Castillo? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So that this item has been
Chairman,
passed. Thank you all
Thank
for
you.
helping. Madam Clerk, make a note to bring Mr. DeSanti and Mr. Roberts back for next week, of course.
So
Okay?
noted, Mr. Chair.
Thank you all. And let's take a brief, we'll stand at each about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back, and then we'll go into the budget articles. Madam Clerk, I'm just gonna go mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Unmuted. Hello, hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Hello? Oh,
Hello?
great, okay, fantastic. Just very quickly, we got to go to an item that's on the docket for one of the appointments, but meanwhile, all committee members were sent an email that has all the substitutions in Larry Mancini's breakdown. Do my committee members have that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. So why don't you look that over, and then if, I suggest you look at, well, Mr. Mancini's, well, I don't have it in front of me, the breakdown, and then we'll go one step at a time, okay? So let's do, so right now we have to take up, which item, Madam Clerk?
Item number 11, Mr. Chair.
I have to take up item number 11 again, a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is that fair?
Second.
Second.
All right. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Madam Clerk, item number 7?
11.
11, I mean, I'm sorry.
Communication from the Son of the Mayor dated March 8, 2021, informing the honorable members of the City Council that pursuant to Section 302B and 1103 of the Providence Home Charter of 1980, as amended, and Public Law, Chapter 45-50, Sections 1 through 31, passed in 1987, he is this day appointing Tracy Picard of 139 Wood Street, Providence, Rhode Island, 02909, as a member of the Human Relations Commission for a term to expire on January 31st, 2024, and respectfully submit the same for your approval.
Welcome, is Tracy, that's Tracy Picard? Am I saying right, Picard? Are you related to Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise?
Yes, he's my great grandson.
Okay, you're hired.
I love it. You come with an enterprising background, so it's excellent to hear. So, Ms. Picard, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you like to join the Human Relations Commission, and also thank you for waiting.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm sure everyone here is quite exhausted from that extremely long and very detailed conversation. So I am a public historian and researcher. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island, and I'm especially excited to represent my own family, and including my grandmother, to the Human Relations Commission. I'm very excited about bringing my background as a historian, because I'm very concerned with facilitating access to knowledge and information in a lot of different types of ways. I'm interested to see how things work in Providence in the Human Relations Commission, and I'm just really excited to contribute.
Fantastic. And it also looks like you have a green thumb.
That's what I do.
Excellent. That's fantastic. And Wood Street, what ward are you in? Do you know?
13.
Okay. All right. So that's great to know. So, committee members, do you have any comments or questions of Ms. Picard?
I just would like to say thank you very much for your patience. We didn't realize there was another item, an appointment on. So we're sorry that we made you listen to our discussion, but that was actually a brief discussion. We have lengthier discussion, so we did spare you a bit of pain. But anyway, thank you so much for your interest in serving the city of Providence. It's an important role that you're in, and we're just absolutely thrilled to have someone of your caliber and interest stepping up. So thank you.
Happy to be here.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval.
Okay.
Unless somebody else.
Yes. I got a motion for, hold on, everybody. Motion by Vice Chair, second by Councilman Anthony, but Councilman Anthony has her hand up. Councilwoman Anthony.
I am so sorry. I think, again, the Vice Chairman has said everything that I had to say, but I wanted to also thank you for your willingness to serve, and I think you're going to be a wonderful addition. So thank you. I look forward to hearing your contributions, and again, can't thank you enough for waiting to be heard tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Picard. Any other comments or questions during this discussion?
No, Mr. Chair.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ms. Picard, you have been now gone to the ringer on the City Council Committee of Finance Committee. Now you go to the full council. I'm sure you'll be fine and you'll get approved. welcome, by the way. Nice to meet you. And I'm happy to hear that you're willing to serve. And, you know, it's always good to see people willing to step up and put their, let's call it their free time, you know, sometimes for thankless hours on end. And so I want to thank you for those thankless hours. So with that, be well, be safe, and we'll thank you, and we'll move on to the next item. Actually, item 1, 2, and 3, I believe. Right, madam? Thank you. Right, so, committee members, you should have received the proposed substitutions. What we need to do is make a motion to substitute item 1, 2, and 3 with items 1A, 2A, and 3A.
So moved.
Second. All right, discussion, all in favor? Aye. Motion. Okay, and then we'd like to enter into the record a 3-page document, a fiscal note, or I think I would call it maybe a reconciliation note, Mr. Mancini, is that fair to say?
That is fair, Mr. Chairman.
So it's a 3-page document from Ms. Silvera and Mr. Mancini. It's a reconciliation on this proposed these budget articles explained. And the 3 budget articles, of course, folks, are the appropriations, the compensation, and the classification ordinance. As you know, we already approved the tax ordinance. Mr. Mancini, so enter in the record as exhibit A, to items 1, 2, and 3, Madam Clerk. Make that motion.
So moved.
Second by
Second.
Councilwoman Castillo. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Mr. Mancini, do you want to take us through, excuse me, Mr. Vera, whoever's taking us through the reconciliation note?
I'm joined this evening, Mr. Chairman, by Ms. Lindberg and Ms. Silveria, but I was asked on behalf of the Finance Department to lead the presentation, so I will do that. Mr. Chairman, the document before you dated March 31 has been continually reviewed and updated as appropriate when changes were necessary. As you know, we have been monitoring the FY21 budget on a continuing authority basis, and we have pleased to say that departments have operated within the range of that continuing appropriation predicated on the fiscal year 20 budget. This budget, as you know, Mr. Chairman, we seek your approval out of committee for the FY21 fiscal year. The document will demonstrate to you that the original proposed budget submitted on May 1st, 2020 was submitted in the amount of $506,843,316. This revised proposed budget, subject to your review and approval out of committee, is now at $510,917,760, a change of $4,074,440. I will speak to the change and the reasons behind the changes. In the section on page 1 marked revenues, the Finance Department, under the direction of Ms. Silveria and Ms. Lindberg, prepared those changes of revenues that sustained a revenue reduction or revenue loss naturally through the budget based upon what was originally planned for revenue and then what actually has occurred year to date, fiscal year to date, right through the 8 months. These represent changes that are associated with revenues that were unable to attain what we originally anticipated last April and May when the budget was submitted, and basically has endured through the height of the pandemic, all things considered. Those changes total $6,029,149, and that is a revenue reduction or a loss in revenues. We present that to you in this fashion so that you can measure the impact associated with the pandemic, impact to the economy. And they have been proposed, they are submitted to you by department, and they show the original budget, the proposed, what we're amending it to. And again, this amendment is to reflect accuracy based on reporting right through the presentation and preparation of this particular document. When you turn to page 2, Mr. Chairman, if I may, at the very top of the page, you will see a schedule that supports revenue associated with the state adopted budget in December of 2020. And that budget included the CARES Act funding that was received by the state from the federal government, and the distribution and appropriation of those funds to the various communities in Rhode Island, Providence in particular. Providence was the beneficiary of $6.8 million of additional revenue by category, by the categories that we normally and routinely record in state revenue. And they include.
Mr. Mancini?
Yes.
Because we're on page, you said page 2, is that correct, you said?
That is correct. Page 2 of the memorandum prepared by Ms. Silverio.
Right, can you just tell me what's the account number, or what, where are we?
It'll start at the top, it'll say non-departmental 101-000-420002.
So you're saying the 34,077,000.
Right, there was no change in pilot as we received every dollar that was expected, and we're thankful for that, but there was no change, no reduction, no loss, no gain in pilot funding. It remained as budgeted, as proposed. As we move down that list, Mr. Chairman, you'll see that there was a reduction in the amount of what's called distressed cities. We sustained a reduction, and I want to be, Mr. Chairman, if I could just back up a second. Due to the fact that this was federal funds that came to the state, based upon the Auditor General's opinion and by support of the city's outside auditors, we were required in a timely fashion to complete our city year-end audit to reclassify the receipt of these funds as coronavirus relief funds rather than the component that they normally would fall into. That was an accounting change that was cited by the Auditor General for every community in Rhode Island, to the credit of our controller and our finance team. And I believe they worked with the city's internal auditor for that particular knowledge. We were able to successfully reclassify the ability to recognize those funds that were received by the federal government from Congress in December, therefore by the state to the city, by the designation that it was expected to be classified, which is known as coronavirus relief funds. So as you move down that schedule, Mr. Chairman, you will see.
So I just want to, just so I get to it, I think, which is when I look at department, the first one, 42002, we had a proposed, we got our pilot, no change.
Correct.
When it came to distressed city, well, we received 4 million less approximately from the state.
That is correct.
The grant was 2.5.
That is correct.
State motor vehicle reimbursement, it was 12.9. But then when the federal government provided their federal relief package, we then recaptured that value, those sums from the coronavirus relief fund of 26.494542 mil, right?
That is exactly correct, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
So that's how you recoup that. So the way that was working was that if the federal government did not provide that relief, then we would have had most likely an additional deficit of that 26 mil, right? That's fair to say, right?
Fair to say.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. So then you got meals and beverages. My question is that one, you got meals and proposed, amended. Meals and beverages, can you explain to me how that stayed the same or actually went up?
Mr. Chairman, oddly enough, while there were restrictive provisions on restaurants during the height of the pandemic in the spring of last year, closing out as part of the FY20 budget, as those restrictions were begun to relax over the summer, and don't forget there was a significant amount of takeout business. They still fall under the meals tax. And as we moved to the fall and winter, we saw no real loss of revenue from the state's collection of the meals and beverage tax. So we're thankful for that. And I think it's a reflection of what actually is happening in society. Unfortunately, unlike the room tax, I think there is still going to be a struggle in getting hotel business back to where we would expect as a tourist city, Providence being known for being a tourist city. But nonetheless, in the meals and beverage, we sustained that fairly well.
You actually got a plus, right? It looks like it increased more. My question is, when it comes to those two items, what's the time? What is the time? Is it from when to when? July 1st to what? Like that?
July 1st to June 30, but there's a natural accounting 2-month delay from the state. The state takes about a 2-month period, a 60-day accrual period when they report to us. So monies that they report in February were actually monies that were receipted in December by the state.
So then when you go to the total state and state pass-through revenue, you proposed actually 69.1 originally, and now we're amending it to 75,994,996.
That's
with a
correct.
change of 6,805,893. And that's based on, it looks like the lion's share of course really comes from, well, actually, a meal and beverage didn't drop off, but the federal government's corona relief package pretty much, that basically bailed us out at that point. And
That is
actually
correct.
gave us.
And the truth is, Mr. Chairman, that's true in every community in Rhode Island. Every community that receives pass-through funds.
I'm with you. Let's just focus on Providence. I'm with you on that. We recognize that. We recognize the federal government did not do what they did. Every community in the country potentially would be in the negative column. We understand that. Right?
That's correct.
So the next one, property tax.
So the next one, Mr. Chairman, the next one was,
explain that?
I can. So, Mr. Chairman, the next one has to do with the vitality and the successful continuing implementation of the city's tax practices. I'm pleased to say that both at closeout year-end fiscal 20, as we closed out fiscal 20's year-end and had those results audited, we saw no diminishment in the collection of taxes. In fact, we finished the year at a healthy surplus within taxes, about 50 basis points or a half a percentage point greater than the adopted levy. I'm pleased further, Mr. Chairman, to tell you in the committee that trend has continued. Right through the first 3 quarters of this year, we're seeing activity that mirrors the first 3 quarters of fiscal 20. And we're very confident that the fourth quarter, which begins in earnest tomorrow in April, if you will do the same thing. And we are highly confident that we will not only collect what was budgeted in the adoption of the levy that this committee approved back in June and July, but we do see better collection. And on that basis, we decided that we could increase the collection rate from what was originally budgeted at 93.5%.
Ina, could you please mute the council person this time, so this way let's give it, just mute. Did you do it?
Yes, she's all set.
Thank you.
I do want to
Mr.
be
Chairman, so
respectful.
we changed the collection rate from what was 93.5% when we first submitted the budget back in last May. Based on the strength of our collections, we're confident that the collection rate will easily be at 94%. That represents the bulk of those changes there, plus additional revenue identified by the assessor throughout the process since the levy was adopted last June and July. And that rounds out the change of approximately 3.2 million in the category of taxes. When taken together with the pickup from the coronavirus relief, those two items offset the $6 million revenue loss, and we end up with a $4 million revenue pickup, sufficient to cover the change in expenditures equal to the $4 million. And they follow on page 2, beginning with the category that says citywide. We go through an entire category of changes that by category, by line item, and by account code of the various changes. And I'm pleased, Mr. Chairman, to discuss any and all of them with you at the moment. This information was shared with your internal auditor and city treasurer, and I believe was furnished to the clerk and your committee. And they are fairly well self-explanatory, but I can give you more detail as to what resulted and how those changes became either beneficial or detrimental to the budget. But in the end, they were $4 million of additional expense.
Yep. Before we do that, committee members, do you have any questions about that portion at this time?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right, Mr. Mancini, why don't you move on to the expenditure side?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first item that appears in the chart below, citywide, it'll show you a citywide savings of 1.9 million and change on Class A, this is non-public safety, Class A salary savings due mostly through attrition, essential hiring only, and the non-filling of positions that were not necessary, both across the city and in the city Class A salaries. There was an increase in cost associated with temporary salaries as a result of the recreation department. There was an increase in that budget. I'm sorry, there was a pickup of 560,000 in temporary salaries due to the closure of those rec centers through most of the year brought on by the pandemic. In the category of fire and then followed by police, there was increased cost associated with overtime. This is overtime that will not be reimbursed by FEMA. That determination has already been made either due to staffing shortages or other conditions associated with departmental callback. And that goes on. So the city will also see a reduction in its medical expense by approximately $1 million. There was, at the time of the budget submission last May, there was an undesignated savings category that we had expected to save. Given the change in the pickup of the coronavirus relief funds, We are now able to eliminate that undesignated savings category to zero, so that that becomes a budget reduction, but it also will all work its way out to a neutral position. Next in line is a $217,000 item that was moved in the non-departmental category from neighborhood services to a category called grants. We took the 217 from the neighborhood services line and it went into grants. Those grants are associated with family services. Mr. Chairman, and your committee are well aware, during the summer and early fall, you entertained many discussions with the city's several agencies associated with diversionary services. This particular 217 is earmarked for family services by I think mutual agreement of all parties. The next items are miscellaneous expenses in HR. That is a budget reduction. The following one is a miscellaneous reduction by private contractors in HR as well. Following that is the police items. There is a reduction in expenditure of the police red light camera expense because there was an associated reduction in the revenue that we would have generated. The expense works off the amount of revenue we collect. Likewise, with the speed camera, the same philosophy. There's a reduction in the expense because there was a reduction in the revenue that would have been generated. Traffic engineering had a reduction in the cost for traffic signs. DPW had a increase in street sweeping expense associated with their activities, and heat, light, and power had an increase of approximately $1 million from what was submitted as a budget based upon information that was compiled by the Office of Sustainability. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I will continue that report on page 3.
Mr. Mancini, just heat, light, and power.
Yep.
I mean, during the pandemic, I mean, most city buildings were, I mean, people were working from home, et cetera. I mean,
Yep.
we had numerous conversations about that. Why did that go up? One, this is a two-part question. One, did you originally underestimate what you thought heat, light, and power was going to be in general? Or if not, can you explain why would it be even more when basically everybody was pretty much, there was so much teleworking going on?
The vast.
And by the way, DPW wasn't even around. Basically, they were all checked out for months. Everybody sitting home. So, can you explain?
I can. The vast majority of that, Mr. Chairman, was associated with a lag in billing that was not submitted to the city in a timely enough fashion in order for us to process and make the payments before the prior year end. And there was probably some inaccuracy in budgeting based upon the prior year expenditure as it made its way to the budget last year. This is meant to ensure that we can finish the year in a sustained and balanced budget. And that's the more accurate reflection of that account.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that's a big miss, right? For the sake of conversation.
It is a fairly large. It's a fairly large change, but I think the 4.6 million number is probably right about where it ought to be. It should be.
I'm fine with that. I understand we're gonna pay our bills. What I'm saying is that's a pretty big miss. That's all. Okay, that's fine. All right. So why don't we continue, please?
Okay. So we're gonna go to the top of page 3. And we're going to continue. And with that, we have the salary account for police and the various sub-salary accounts. You'll see that there's been an increase in that police salary line of $2.4 million. I wish to point out to the committee that with the passage of the police contract, the bulk of the retroactive payment, which is retroactive to July 1 of 2019, all of that prior year in the first 8 months of this year has been reflected in that net number, as there was already attrition savings that would have been generated and other savings in the department. This is the net change that would be needed to accommodate the retroactive payments on the salaries that are due to the FOP members. And bear in mind, they will also be making retroactive contributions, but those will go directly to the pension plan. They don't go to the general fund. So I wish to put that on record, Mr. Chairman. The other two categories under police are reflective of changes within those categories as well. Specialty pays and police. There has been a savings in police medical, rounding out those savings or net cost. The next several categories under human services, Mr. Chairman, those are all related to the diversionary programming, and you'll see include salaries, postage, advertising, dues and subscriptions, and the biggest change in that will be contractual services, and that they total a grand total increase of $412,000. At that juncture, we have the next category of major change was debt service. Debt service had a savings of 3.3 million, given that there was debt service reserve funds that were on deposit, that when the bond issue expired and was fully completed, we were able to seek the return of that debt service reserve fund, a total of 3.3 million, and that was beneficial to the budget in that category. The last item is a non-departmental item. Mr. Chairman, we had submitted the budget with a zero intention to fund the rainy day, based upon an opinion of the law department, and I think shared previously before this committee, that it would be appropriate to have at least some minimal deposit into the rainy day fund to be in compliance with the ordinance. And so for the year FY21, clearly induced by pandemic conditions, it was appropriate to fund at this time only 100,000 into the rainy day fund, which currently has a balance of 14.9 million and has not been drawn upon and will not be drawn upon to balance any budget.
So, Mr. Mancini, first of all, do these changes create a balanced budget?
They do, sir.
Okay. The next question is, are there any tax increases in the residential, commercial, or any other rates or fees in any form or fashion?
Absolutely not.
Okay. The next question is President, are you saying there's only 100,000 in the rainy day, or you're only appropriating 100,000 into the rainy day? What's the total rainy day account, I should say? Let me start off with that. How much is the rainy day account?
14,900,000 and change.
Okay. And then with this, makes it 15 million or makes it 14?
15 million.
Okay, great. So you're able to appropriate another 100,000 into that rainy day account,
That is
right?
correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. All right.
So, Mr. Chairman, that rounds out the changes by category. The changes do equal a balanced budget. There are $4 million of changes in expenditure, some of them because we had done the best estimate possible last May during the pandemic period. And of course, we were successful in finishing last year in a balanced budget surplus position, if you will. But these are some of the changes that were brought about by the loss of revenue. And we're thankful that we were able to make most of that up through the state's additional funding on a pass-through basis. I'm prepared to answer any questions of the committee.
Yep. Question by committee members?
Mr. Chair?
Vice Chair and then Councilman Anthony. Vice Chair?
Thank you. On the rainy day fund, what is the percentage requirement that we have to deposit in the rainy day fund? What is that? And is it an annual or is it based on the balance in general?
So, Madam Leader, the provision for the rainy day fund is that the ordinance speaks to us achieving a 5% of the budget balance. That's in what they call the fund balance. So the fund balance is different than the rainy day fund. The fund balance is assets over liabilities arriving at this year. With this year's surplus, the fund balance is now $25 million. The rainy day fund, an account with cash in it, is now 14.9. The distinction is that the rainy day fund was established post the return from deficit position to surplus position some 2 years later. But the point I'm making is that there is no specific provision for how much must go in the rainy day fund. What we have been doing in the past several years is 1% of the city budget less the school appropriation. So on approximately 300 some million, we've been depositing 3.6 million annually up until this year. Given the impact to the budget based on the spending requirements, we do know, based upon advice by the solicitor's office, that we had to put some amount in there, any amount. And without stating that it would be an amount less than $1, it was appropriate for us to put in $100,000 for the FY21 budget. And that will bring the balance in that cash account to close to $15 million. And we have no intention, and nor do we make any provision to draw from that rainy day fund, even during a period when ordinarily other cities and towns might consider drawing from their rainy day fund. So.
Thank you. And I'm glad that that's your philosophy. And I'm glad you didn't use $1.
Well, we were trying to have some integrity to that, Madam Leader. Thank you very much. That's a sincere conversation. Thank you very much.
I'm good, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Good work.
Councilwoman Anthony?
Yes, I have a question on the neighborhood services account, the $217,000. What is that money going toward?
That money is earmarked for direct grant expenditure to the family services, and I believe Madam Councilwoman, we have already processed those expenditures and have made that available to the agency.
And is that for a particular program of theirs?
It's for their diversion program. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Anthony, they were zeroed out on finances this fiscal year. So this was to help them just get back to that diversion program and have the Go Team program continue.
So it's an existing program.
Yes, it's for the existing Go Team program.
Yep.
They were zeroed out on funding. Mr. Mancini, and this is to make them whole so the Go Team program can continue on in our cities, in our great city. Mr. Mancini, can we talk about pension payments? Where are we with that, and what does this budget articles reflect?
So the budget articles will reflect, once again, for the 9th year, expectation of 100% pension payment. And we have been making steady deposits into the pension system. Through this date, there is 41 million remaining of the 73 million that's due by June 30 to be made. We normally get through the 4th quarter collections, Mr. Chairman, and at that time, we make an appropriate determination for how much additional we can afford to put in before June 30. The remainder, which will probably be around 30 million, as is typical, will come from the state's appropriation in July of the new year budget. I have confirmed with State Division of Municipal Finance, even through this day, that the pilot will remain intact and revert back to the pilot formula as it was, and that's expected to be close to 34 million, as has been proposed and now under consideration by the General Assembly.
Okay. Mr. Mancini, if this gets squared away this evening, when will the administration submit their proposed 2022 budget?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're seeking to have Mayor would like to do a budget address on April 27th. If I may take a moment, Mr. Chairman, it's my personal recommendation to this committee that we be allowed to do that by special meeting of the council. And the reason why I asked that, Mr. Chairman, that way the ordinances could be formally introduced and referred to committee. And I would presume, Mr. Chairman, that could happen as early as the first week in May, subject to your approval. That's important to note because if it goes through the ordinary clerk docketed process and they're docketed on Friday, April 30th, they will not get on the committee, on the council docket till May 6th. And that would mean that we would lose a week of review time, even for the benefit of the council mostly. So I would ask, and we haven't made that request yet officially of the council president and leadership, but I believe that request is forthcoming and I would ask that permission. So I'm saying April 27th, Mr. Chairman, which meets the May 1 submission deadline.
So it's gonna be a short time frame for review.
Well, no, if you get it in April 27th, it'll give the council 5 weeks of full review into the first week in June when we begin the tax billing process. I think overall, Mr. Chairman, there'll be 6 weeks of review for the council if we could stick to that program. And we were going to share that once we had confirmation, but we worked out the timeline for tax billing and we're going to share that with the internal auditor once we know that the process of the special meeting.
And has the State House given you any inclination on what their timeline is?
They have not, but I was in a meeting yesterday with state officials, as we do meet once a month, and their lead budget analyst that represents the city of Providence has indicated that it appears that the budget, at least for pilot, will remain at 34 million based upon conversations that they had with the General Assembly. And I presume, Mr. Chairman, that the General Assembly, while they're working their budget out, we'll hear from them soon. There's a May estimating conference that will determine what those revenues are. And they, like the city, are working with the American Recovery Plan to see how those revenues will play out. And we'll know more soon. But as it stands, we're expecting that we'll rely on those revenues to be in the category of 34 million.
Mr. Mancini, I know people have been talking about it already. People, I guess, already starting to want to spend money, I guess. So the federal government's going to be supposedly giving us over $100 million. How much money?
I believe it's closer to 160 million.
$160 million. And the question is, in the 2022 budget, are you building that into the budget, or it's going to be a separate conversation in what we do with that money?
So, Mr. Chairman, while we're still seeking guidance, it's the belief of the finance department officials, and we've been briefing the administration that the basis for the ability to spend that money is very strict in some categories. It can be used for loss of revenue. That's a primary concern, because as you may recall, Mr. Chairman, on federal FEMA submissions, you cannot submit for loss of revenue. You can only submit for additional expenditures and only at a 75 reimbursement rate. This is unique, and this is definitely special. So it could be used for loss of revenue, but it has to be the full year prior to the pandemic. That really means fiscal 19. And while fiscal 19 was a good year and a stable year, that might be the pivot point on which we measure loss of revenue. So I think it's our expectation, I've spoken to the finance directors, that we will budget perhaps to that number minimally, and then throughout the year monitor it so that if there is any diminishment or any loss in that budget amount, we would be able to draw from those funds to make up that loss. As to the other source of spending, Mr. Chairman, the administration is working with all of its affiliates, all of the departments, to develop a plan on the best practices to spend that money over the next 2 or 3 years. But one of the things it cannot do, which is specific in the law, and I know that you and I have had this discussion, that there may be other ways to do so, is that it cannot go directly to the pension plan. And while that's somewhat disappointing in our case, what it really means is we'll have to find more alternative ways to free up general fund money to do that, to do just that to the general fund, and hopefully find a way to replace that with the American Recovery Plan dollars. So all of that is under high consideration as we speak.
So with that said, so the 2022 budget is going to basically stand alone, and then the $160 million
That's correct.
Is going to be a continuing conversation between the administration and the legislative branch of government.
Absolutely.
To see what to do with this money. My other question is, I'm going to say it now, and I know I'm going to probably be a broken record at the end. I would hate to see that we use $160 million in order to do political short-term measures versus try to utilize it to address long-term systemic problems in the city. And I understand with that kind of money, everybody gets a little excited. You know, let's build an extra tower. Let's put all these, let's do all these kinds of wishful thinking projects. And I get it. It gets very exciting when people get this kind of money and they feel that there's no conditions attached to it. My concern, of course, is I think we need to be extremely measured on how and what we do with this money, and we should try to figure out how to make it, and like I said, address long-term, if we can, long-term financial systemic problems if we can, versus, and I know it's going to be tough because we're going to be a lot of people clamoring for this money, there's going to be a lot of organizations and a lot of political pressure to do political pet projects and et cetera, which means, to get the bang for the buck because election season's upon us and everybody wants to get caught up with that. But once again, here I am at a junction in the city government where we have a unique opportunity to actually do something that creates a long-term positive financial impact, and I hope that we don't squander it based on political wish lists of folks and stuff like that. And I harken back to previous administrations when everybody thought we solved the pension problem, and it was just a political expedient pension proposal that didn't have the long-term pension reform that they claimed. And the city missed that opportunity because when we were there, Mr. Messina, you and I were there, you only have those kinds of those opportunities to address financial situations once in a lifetime. And here I am twice in my political career where the city's at a junction that you have this kind of money where we need to be very judicious and very financially pragmatic about it, almost like you don't have it and do the right things with it. So this is where I just wanted this is what I'm going to be looking for. I'm not speaking for all my colleagues. I can just tell you, like I said, this is my last term. My take is I want to have the city be in the best possible financial situation come next term for the next mayor, next council, so they don't have to make they don't have to make as many difficult decisions as they would if this type of money didn't come to us. So I just want to know where I'm coming from. Councilman Taylor.
We support the same fiscal prudence. Thank you.
And I know it's tough, by the way. There's gonna be a lot of political pressure, trust me. Councilman Taylor?
Yes, I got a couple questions. One is, Larry, can you go over the pension thing? Because I know last time we were behind and we were taking out loan or whatever. Can you explain where that 41 million came from, like in a couple months or 3 months?
Well, we weren't behind. We were looking at a possibility, given the pandemic's impact early on. We were thinking that we may be cash restricted because of tax collections or other revenues. And we thought, for assurance sake, that we would consider a line of credit. When we discussed that, and it was decided that we would not pursue that. We did not have the council's support of that, rightfully so in their case, I think. And we did not do that. What we held off, Councilman, in making more immediate, earlier than June 30 payments. Normally, in a normal year, we take the tax collections and the pilot payment that we receive in July. The pilot payment generally extinguishes the balance from the prior year. That practice has been continued for the past several years, much better than it was even a decade before that. A decade before that, those payments were not made until at least October or November for the prior year, basically relying on the first 2 quarters of tax collections. Over the past 6 years, we have been able to extinguish the final payment with the receipt of the pilot funds in July. And bear in mind, as you may know, Councilman, I've said this on prior testimony, the payment is calculated as if not due until June 30. So any payment made sooner has an interest reduction or an interest savings, if you will. What I'm saying is, while we've been skillfully managing cash flow all through this fiscal year and under pandemic conditions, we have made early advance payments against the 73 million portion of the general fund obligation. So we've probably put about 32 million towards that. And what remains today, as we speak today, is close to 41 million or $40 million, which we would use the 4th quarter. And by the way, just last week, we cleared the largest expenditure in the city budget, nearly $28 million in debt service that's due at March 31st. And when we pay it, we get back our share from the state on school bonds, close to 21 million. So while that we've cleared that, and we're moving into the 4th quarter collection with about 30 million in treasury as we speak, we feel confident that before the 4th quarter is over, we'll be able to set aside another $10 million on the pension balance, leaving about 31 million, which is about where we would be under normal conditions. And that would match up with what we expect to be in next year's pilot payment that gets paid to us in July, that we carry back to the prior year. And that would extinguish the balance, with all due respect to the process, under the conditions that we have normally seen prior to the pandemic. So the 41 million is the remaining portion of $73 million that was due at June 30.
And we're going to get, you figure 30 million or 32 million from in July, and you're hoping the other 11 or 12 million.
Yeah, we're expecting the pilot to be close to last year at 34 million. Everything I've discussed with state officials suggests that it'll be 34 million. That's good news. There'll be no diminishment there, and that'll help us extinguish any balance due at June 30. And I'm hopeful that we can reduce that by another 10 million between today and June 30.
Okay. Do you know what return rate we got this year by chance? Well, to date, what we got.
Yeah, we've shared those results regularly, and we just had those results shared with the Board of Investment Commissioners. If I said under 4%, I may be misspoken, but I can get that information to the internal auditor. It has been shared at the Board of Investment Commissioners, the treasurer and the chairman and our finance director are members of that board, but it was shared recently. I apologize for not having it off the top of my head. So
to date, from last year to this year, we've only got 4% return.
Well, that would be on a fiscal. Well, that would be. They do it on a calendar year basis. We report on a fiscal year. So I would say that last year's calendar return was probably under 4%. The good news is this year's calendar activity through the first 2.5 months of the year was reported at last week's Board of Investment Commission meeting that we've already achieved a 4.4 or 4.5 yield in return on investment already the first 2.5 months of the year.
Okay. And also, mind, Mr. Chair, I got a few more questions. The homestead tax, where are we at this point in that? I know.
So through the March 15th.
I know we've got a report in February. I haven't heard any reports since then. Like how many outstanding, what's a percent wise that have applied for the homestead? What's a percent that's still outstanding?
So, Councilman, we met with our assessor just today. In fact, through the March 15th second deadline that was extended, there's about 85% compliance factor, leaving an additional 15%. I think in a perfect world, you might see 95%. The assessor's office will do a statistical analysis of that. They will be sharing that with finance, and we will be sharing it with the internal auditor, and therefore sharing it with the council. I do think she would like to ask that we extend it, and I have given her preliminary authority to do so. I have informed her that she should accept all applications right through the levy adoption, which is what we testified to this committee, no matter when that is, sometime in June. And then for those who do not comply, perhaps with another letter reminder after we look at the list. Once again, as I had testified previously, the assessor confirmed today again that we will make every provision to abate those changes even after the bill arrives in July, right through the period of October, which is the first appeal process of October 24th.
Are they going to share, or is she going to share? I know she mentioned that she was going to share with us.
Yes, she is.
Each ward, like the people that didn't have.
She will compile an identical list that was shared, I believe, with the internal auditor at the first deadline just prior to February 15th. They're just making sure that they have, because some of this information was filed manually and some of it was filed electronically. They want to be sure that they have all the manual applications that came in. They come in during the weekly mail, even with staff being alternating on different days. They are processing even the manual ones. I believe by sometime midweek next week, she'll have the most recent list, and it will be shared with the internal auditor and every member of the council.
Okay, two more things, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
The temps, I know I've asked several times about what temps are still being paid. Do we have an idea of that at all?
Councilman, with my own embarrassment, I apologize. I did not have the information ready for you this evening. I have given that information to the HR director, and I believe he was planning on sharing that directly with your internal auditor via her. So I would ask that if it hasn't been provided to her, I will make sure that he does so.
Okay, my last is just basically a statement that we only have April, May, June, 3 months left roughly of this budget.
Yep.
I will be voting for it tonight, but if the fire chief position is in the next budget, I will not be voting for it. If you figure out, we haven't had a fire now in 7 years, at $175,000. That's $1.2 million that we have not had a fire chief, and we don't have an extra to say, here's the 1.2 million for the fire chief. So since it's only 3 months left, I'm not going to be a big stickler on it, but I will, at this next budget, guarantee I will not vote for the budget if the fire chief position is in there. We're throwing $175,000 out the window, and we still do not have 1.2 million. We don't have it. So just want to put that on record, and thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Any comments, questions by committee members? Council members on the line at all? Excuse me, Councilwoman Anthony? Good.
Thank you,
You're
Mr.
muted.
Chairman. I would just like to know why it was that we didn't receive these amendments until 7:09 tonight.
Madam Councilwoman, I can only speak for the finance department. I have been working regularly with our finance directors, and we've been sharing as they were ready with the internal auditor, the treasurer, over the past few weeks, as thinking that we would be actually having this conversation, I think, as early as 2 weeks ago. So these changes are not changes that were prepared today. The letter was redated today because of the appearance at tonight's meeting, but they were available over the past week or two.
I appreciate that. I guess I'm going to say that tonight I'm not going to be able to support this. I'm just, this is my second budget. The process is flawed. The public has not been able to see this amendment. It could have been discussed in committee 2 weeks ago. There's a lot of negotiations that were going on behind the scenes as usual, and particularly with regard to the neighborhood services account. And I just don't understand why it is that we cannot have these discussions in public so the public gets to at least see what's going on. I also will say that I think the fact that we didn't have another public hearing, I know we had one and I know we're only required to have one. because we never really had an opportunity to discuss the expenditures, and the public hasn't had an opportunity to weigh in. So I think this process has been quite flawed, and I cannot support. I'm going to abstain, actually. I appreciate all the work that Mr. Mancini's done, but I think it's incumbent on us as a council to have a more public process around this.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. Any other comments or concerns, questions by committee members?
Motion to recommend approval
As amended.
All right.
as amended. Thank you.
As amended. Is there a second? Council Castillo, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, just for one other thing, that Mr. Mancini, I guess we should, this is just for the record, the 3 budget amendments reflect your financial reconciliation note, is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you. All right. And Councilman Anthony, do you have any more questions?
No.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll let the Councilman Anthony reflect that you're abstaining, is that correct?
Correct.
For the record? Okay, Michelle, okay.
So noted.
And thank you all. Long night. We'll continue to have conversations. It goes before the full council. I suggest administration and the financial team over here reach out to all the council members and go through this budget and go through the reconciliation sheet. Madam Clerk, if you could now forward, I think you should forward all this to all the council members, this stuff, so they can see it in advance, okay?
The substitutions and the
Yeah.
reconciliation
Yeah.
notes. So noted, Mr. Chair, I will do that.
All right. Is there any more further business before this committee?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Thank you all. Thank you, Madam Clerks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Mancini.
My pleasure.
done.
And the team
It's a-
as well. Thank you.
It's a tough year.
It is. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, madam.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Be well and be safe, everybody.